You wake up in another world with nothing but healing magic, basically the kind of skill people look down on. No fame, no cheat weapon, just surviving day by day inside a dangerous labyrinth city. Then you meet her, a broken slave girl everyone else gave up on. You heal her wounds, buy her freedom, and somehow, that small decision starts changing everything. Shiki ended up in another world out of nowhere. He was working as a healer at Eris Hospital in the suburbs of Labyrinth City, Merhatz, until his boss fired him on the spot and told him never to come back. A little earlier at the hospital, Shiki had just finished treating a patient. The total came to 400 zeni, including the heal and the disc poison. The girl clasped her hands together and begged him to knock the price down just a little more. Shiki knew he couldn't lower the fee on his own. Doing that again without permission would get him fired by Eris. His situation was already tight. The girl was a regular adventurer who came in after labyrinth dives. She was short on cash too, with broken gear from her last run. She grinned and leaned in, suggesting he could just charge her for the disc poison alone. Eris would never find out. She pressed up close to him with a playful look, asking if it was okay. Shiki froze. He was very much aware of what was pressing against him and told himself this was dangerous. She told him it was fine to touch a little and offered to let him do more if he wanted. Shiki wavered. Then the thought hit him. Eris Hospital was already struggling financially. If he gave another discount without permission, his job was on the line. His job was on the line. He caved. He dropped the price to 200 zeni. The girl cheered. He told himself it was fine, just a little. She was already getting what she wanted, and he knew it. He realized she pulled this same trick every time. He told himself that this time he'd finally do something about it. Shiki lunged forward. The girl yelped, startled. He was going for it. Then a cold voice cut through the room from behind him, asking what exactly he thought he was doing. Eris was standing there. She had been watching the whole time. The girl panicked, yelled a quick thanks for the treatment, and bolted. Eris turned to Shiki and told him, slowly, clearly, that she had told him over and over again not to give discounts without permission. Shiki tried laughing it off. It didn't work. Eris asked why he was touching the girl's chest. He scrambled for a reason. Her chest looked injured, so he had to treat it. Eris pointed out that healing magic didn't require touching. That didn't work either. Shiki dropped to the floor and begged for forgiveness. Eris told him she had put up with it this long because his healing magic was genuinely impressive, but every chance he got, it was the same thing, discounts without permission and harassment on top of it. She also admitted she had originally hired him because she was attracted to him, but she'd had enough. And that's how Shiki ended up homeless and jobless in another world. He sat outside with his packed bags and nursed a drink at a nearby tavern. It was bad, extremely bad. Most clinics wouldn't hire someone without a church background. Eris had actually been unusually open-minded for taking him on. She had clearly planned this ahead of time too, since his bags were already packed when she threw him out. The whole incident with Eris had just made everything worse. Shiki still remembered it clearly. The day before, he had accidentally walked in on Eris in the bath and slipped, grabbing her on the way down. He shook off the memory and told himself now wasn't the time to fall apart. He was in another world. He wanted to build a harem. Someone nearby snapped him back to reality by calling his name. It was the adventurer girl from the hospital. She spotted him drinking and asked what was up. He told her he got fired. She let out an awkward laugh and offered her condolences, looking away, probably because she knew exactly why it happened. After a pause, she asked him what his name was. Shiki was annoyed she didn't know his name after everything. She fired back that they'd only ever really interacted at the hospital, and he should stop saying things that sounded misleading. She introduced herself as Ruruka and told him to remember it. He said he would, while noting to himself that she still hadn't actually paid, and that she was partly why he lost his job. He slumped and sighed. Ruruka suggested he try becoming an adventurer. Shiki pointed out he only had healing magic. She said that was actually fine. A healer was hard to do solo, but a party made it work. He started to warm up to the idea and offered to join hers. She said she couldn't. Her party had a strict member who definitely wouldn't allow it. Ruruka mentioned her party was all girls, and there was one particularly uptight member. Shiki thought it over. He knew himself well enough. If he joined, he'd probably wander into the bath by accident, and something like that would happen. He admitted he didn't really have friends or anyone to team up with. Ruruka, already eating, asked if he'd thought about finding partners. Ruruka told him his healing magic was strong enough that he'd figure something out. She cheered him on between bites. Shiki just replied flatly and stared off, wondering what he was supposed to do. He walked the streets after and remembered the day he was stabbed by a slasher back in his old world and woke up here. He had wandered these same streets with no idea where he was or what had happened, not knowing if it was a dream, a game, or the afterlife. He still remembered the helplessness of that day, and then the relief when Eris took him in. In the end, he'd managed to get himself kicked out. He snapped back to the present when he noticed a crowd gathered nearby. It was a slave market. Shiki looked it over. In this world, there were many ways someone could end up a slave, but the rules were the same across the board. The master had to provide basic necessities, and the slave had to follow orders without question. Those who didn't comply were forced to buy a magic seal called a slave crest. Shiki thought about diving the labyrinth with a slave as his partner. The slave crest meant no risk of betrayal in a monster-filled labyrinth. It wasn't a bad idea. The problem was money. He had just over 60,000 zenny on hand. The cheapest slaves were around 200,000. Going into debt just to buy one wasn't worth it. He decided to give up and walk away. Just before Shiki walked away from the slave market, he spotted a girl in one of the cages. She was a dark elf, badly hurt and wrapped in bandages. The seller noted she probably wouldn't last long. Her condition was so poor they dropped her price to 50,000 zenny. Shiki wondered if a monster had attacked her. He wasn't doing this out of charity. Her price was within his budget, and if she could fight, she'd be useful. He used his appraisal skill. Her name was Yule, a dark elf with dagger arts. Young, but her stats were solid enough for adventurer work. Dark elves were fast. He made up his mind. Shiki walked up and told the seller he wanted the dark elf girl. The seller warned him that fixing her up would cost a lot. She'd need a high-rank healer. Shiki told him to sell her anyway. The deal went through. The contract was drawn up, payment accepted. No returns. Shiki crouched down in front of Yule as the slave crest settled onto her. Yule quietly introduced herself. Shiki told her his name and said they'd head to an inn first. She seemed completely blind. She didn't react to his outstretched hand at all. Shiki checked them into an inn that had a bath in each room, the kind of place that was usually booked for other reasons. The staff at the front desk stared. He told himself it was just a misunderstanding. They were only staying the night. He asked Yule if she was tired from walking and suggested they turn in. She quietly said yes. Once they were in the room, Yule got down on the floor and thanked him for buying her. She said she had no experience, but would serve him as best she could. Shiki felt something uncomfortable stir in him. She was just a kid. He told himself to calm down. He told her that wasn't what he had in mind, and said they should start with treatment first. Yule seemed confused. Shiki cast exhale. Light flooded the room. Yule jolted, startled by the sudden burst of magic washing over her. The bandages fell away. Shiki said the treatment was done. He handed her a mirror. Yule stared at her own reflection. Her eyes were clear. Everything had healed. Yule touched her own face, then her ears, and started to cry. She could see. She could hear properly. She looked up at Shiki through her tears and asked if he was her master. Shiki confirmed it, then couldn't help trying to act cool about it. He asked if he looked good. Yule nodded and said he was cool, cooler than anyone. Shiki did not handle the compliment smoothly. Yule thanked him for healing her face and said she wanted to show her gratitude. She offered to serve him however she could. Shiki told her, firmly, that he hadn't bought her for that. Shiki explained that he was going to become an adventurer, and he'd bought Yule because he wanted a partner for the labyrinth. Yule wasn't sure she'd be much help with only a dagger skill. Shiki told her it was fine. He'd keep healing her until she was back in fighting shape, and for now she could eat as much as she wanted. He was sure they'd work well together. Shiki told her they were heading to the labyrinth tomorrow. Yule straightened up and swore to protect him no matter what. Fighting was her job. Shiki grinned and told her to get along with him from now on. That night, under the moon, the two of them looked forward to what was coming. And just like that, Shiki became a healer adventurer in another world. The labyrinth was a dangerous place full of monsters, and a place where people dreamed of striking it rich. Yule bounced with excitement heading toward it. Shiki watched her and thought she looked like a kid going to an amusement park. They were heading into a monster-filled dungeon, and he already felt guilty about it. Then again, Maybe she was just that confident in her own skills. Yule wiped out the monsters and celebrated with her arms in the air. Shiki watched from behind, unsurprised. She ran back to him asking how she did. Yule looked up at him, eyes sparkling, waiting. Shiki patted her head and told her she did great. She looked exactly like a dog waiting for a reward. Honestly, she was way better than he expected. Yule tore through monsters on both the first and second floors without a scratch. By the time they hit the third floor, Shiki had stopped paying much attention to the fights. His job had basically become cheering her on and patting her head after each win. Yule noticed Shiki going quiet and asked if something was wrong. He caught himself. He couldn't let her worry. The only thing he could actually do right now was praise her as much as possible. He told her she was amazing, and she grinned. Their first run earned around 2,000 zeni, all thanks to Yule. Back at the inn, Shiki acknowledged it was all her doing while Yule happily ate. He felt like a freeloader using her earnings. He thought that if this were Eris, she'd call him out for it. Yule smiled, unbothered. Ruruka burst in, grabbed Shiki, and said she'd finally found him and that he was the only one she could count on. Yule tensed up and asked who she was. Ruruka noticed Yule and got excited, asking if she was a slave. Shiki cleared his throat. Ruruka pointed out she was disgusted that he apparently preferred young girls. Shiki denied it. Shiki introduced Yule as his party member and the slave he bought. He introduced Ruruka as a senior adventurer and former patient from his healer days. Ruruka fawned over Yule, who greeted her shyly. Shiki confirmed Yule could one-shot goblins. Ruruka said her party was looking for an attacker and told Yule that if she ever got tired of her master, she was welcome to join. Shiki firmly told her not to try to poach Yule. Yule refused without hesitation. She said her master had healed her when she was badly hurt at the slave market. Without him, she didn't know where she'd be. He was the most important person to her. Ruruka went quiet. Shiki pointed out the healing had left no trace, which was just how his magic worked. Ruruka realized she'd pushed too far and apologized. Yule had started to cry, and Ruruka quickly backed off. Ruruka said she actually had a job for Shiki. She led them into a room and introduced her two party members, Fran and Sarah. Sarah thanked Shiki for always looking out for Ruruka. One of them, Fran, gave Shiki a cold look the moment he tried to introduce himself. Ruruka explained that Fran had been bitten by a monster and needed her shoulder healed. Shiki asked if she minded scars. Fran told him she counted on him and said he should just do it. Ruruka had already paid the going rate. Shiki cast heal. Fran went still. Fran gave no thanks. She said she hadn't asked for anything. Shiki kept his reaction in check, not in front of Yule. Fran walked off. Ruruka apologized and explained that Fran wasn't actually a bad person, just strongly averse to men. Shiki asked if she was the uptight one Ruruka had mentioned before. Ruruka confirmed it. Shiki decided he'd rather not deal with Fran again if he could help it. That night, Yule called out to Shiki quietly. He told her not to worry about it. The next day, Shiki woke up from a dream full of drill hairstyles, clearly inspired by Fran. He said good morning to Yule. Yule greeted him softly from the bed. The night before, she had insisted on sleeping on the floor because she was a slave, so Shiki had moved her to the bed. He told himself there was nothing wrong with that. She had gone along with it easily enough. Her expression as she looked up at him didn't mean anything, or so he told himself. Yule closed her eyes and tilted her face toward him. Shiki stared. Was she asking for a morning kiss? He thought the cheek might be safer than the lips. She was even puckering up. He called her name, unsure what to do. Yule was clearly embarrassed, but holding herself still, waiting. Shiki felt his resolve shaking. He couldn't just ignore this. It could leave a real mark on her. But he couldn't give in either. He had no idea what the right move was. Shiki patted her on the head instead. Yule opened her eyes, surprised. He told her to get plenty of sleep, eat well, and not overdo it for now. He said she should wait until she was a bit older. Yule asked quietly if she wasn't enough for him. Shiki thought she was probably trying to comfort him after what happened with Fran. That was just how she thought a slave should act. He told her it wasn't like that at all. Shiki told Yule that in a few years, she'd definitely be someone worth admiring. Yule lit up and said she'd do her best. Shiki felt relieved. He'd handled it without hurting her. He cared about her too much to let her down. Shiki said they'd head to the labyrinth after breakfast. Yule agreed happily. He still had his harem plan in the back of his head, but he realized fighting alongside Yule would just get in her way. He'd leave that to her. He noted to himself he didn't even have a weapon. He'd need something for self-defense. Yule wiped out the monsters and ran back to report, then asked if it was time for lunch. She was holding a sandwich. Yule took a big bite of her sandwich with her eyes closed, happy. Shiki watched her eat and thought she looked like a puppy. Then she grabbed his hand and bit down on it. He called her name. She looked up at him. Yule bit into her sandwich and her eyes went wide. She pulled back, startled. The dressing was spicy. Shiki watched her reaction and figured it was the seasoning from the cafeteria leftovers. She recovered quickly and went back to eating. Yule spotted someone stumbling out from deeper in the labyrinth and alerted Shiki. An adventurer staggered toward them, foot badly mangled by a giant ant. He begged them to just close the wound somehow. Shiki told him he'd fix it now. Shiki cast X-Heal. The adventurer stared at his foot in disbelief. It was completely restored. Shiki told him that since the healing was done, it was time to talk payment. He wanted money. Yule cheered for him. Shiki reminded himself he needed to be a decent master for her sake. The adventurer said he didn't need payment, just treasure his own life instead. Shiki made up his mind, called out to Yule, and the two moved on. He felt good about how that looked. Then something hit him in the face and knocked him flat. The adventurer noted that the move just now was pretty cool. The two adventurers, 8 and Geyser, laughed and clapped Shiki on the back, saying his skill was incredible and insisting on treating him to a drink. Shiki had pictured them seeing him off in a more dignified way. Instead, they ended up following him all the way back. He noted there was no real benefit to making male friends, then changed his mind. They all had drinks together, and Shiki took back what he'd said. 8 and Geyser turned out to be decent once you actually talked to them. They apologized for also covering Yule's share. Yule said it was nothing compared to what they'd done. 8 asked if Shiki was really not a priest. Shiki told him to keep the X-Heal quiet. He had his reasons. 8 pointed out that with healing magic like that, plenty of hospitals would want him. The others suggested he open his own clinic, or at least set up a mobile one inside the bar since he seemed to be there all day anyway. Shiki said he'd love to if he could. They told him to ask the bar owner. He'd probably say yes since it would bring in customers. The bar owner approved on the spot. Shiki and Yule set up a treatment table inside the bar. He noted to himself that he'd been temporarily out of work and had felt bad about relying on Yule the whole time. With the money he'd made, Shiki bought a mace for self-defense. Things in this other world were going well. He had Yule beside him, and he said so with a smile. Except for one thing. That one thing was. Yule looked up at him with wide eyes, expectant. Shiki sat rigid on the bed, trying to hold himself together. The problem was having nowhere to put all that pent-up frustration. Shiki woke up in the morning to find his body reacting in a very normal way, with Yule right there beside him. Yule looked at his outstretched hand and asked what it was. Shiki shot up and said it was nothing. He reminded himself it was a completely natural thing. But ever since meeting Yule, she'd been sticking close to him constantly. He knew he couldn't just leave this situation as it was. He needed to do something about it, fast. Laughter came from somewhere downstairs. Shiki went to 8 and Geyser and laid out his problem. He needed to handle things without Yule finding out. 8 stayed calm and thought it over. Geyser was just being an idiot. Shiki was starting to understand both of them better. 8 said there was something that could work, easy to carry around, and it even had an odor-removing effect. It was called slime jelly, mainly used for cooking. Shiki lit up. Using slime material, it might be possible to make something useful. He asked where to get it. The problem was that slime jelly wasn't sold publicly. The only way to get it was to go to the 7th floor of the labyrinth and take it as a drop from the slimes there. Shiki headed out to fight. When he got back, Yule welcomed him home and asked if his stomach was okay. He told her everything was fine. Shiki patted her head and told her he'd been having a private talk with the guys. He said he might have found a way to deal with his situation. He raised his mace and declared it was time to hit the labyrinth. Their target was the 7th floor. Yule cheered and ran ahead. Shiki hadn't expected this. The slime spat mucus that stuck to the floor, and he slipped on it, knocking himself out. Getting the jelly without Yule knowing was off the table now. She rushed over, worried. Yule apologized and said she had failed to protect him. Shiki told her she'd done her job fine. This one was his own fault. He winced in pain. Yule stared at him, eyes filling up. Shiki quickly healed himself and told her he was completely fine. Yule said she had no right to be comforted after failing him. Shiki told her to cheer up. He noticed her ears had drooped and figured they moved with her emotions. He wanted her to keep smiling. Shiki patted her head as usual. Yule smiled softly. That seemed to do it. Shiki thought that maybe, having lived as a slave, she was just hungry for warmth from someone. Patting her had a noticeable calming effect on her. Yule had always believed her only worth was fighting and protecting her master. Failing at that today had shaken the one thing she felt confident about, and she was probably scared of losing her connection to him. If that was the case, there was something he needed to say. Shiki told her it was okay and that he'd always be with her. Yule looked up at him. Her face lit up, and she said yes. She'd gotten her confidence back. Shiki told her he was counting on her next time. Yule said she'd try harder. They called it a day and headed home. Shiki still hadn't gotten what he came for. Tomorrow for sure, he told himself. That evening, Ruruka showed up and asked Shiki if he wanted to go to the labyrinth together the next day. Shiki looked at her. She'd somehow ended up in the room with Yule already. He pointed out she'd said she wouldn't form a party with him. Ruruka said it was fine as long as it was just her. Fran and Sarah were taking a break anyway, and Fran couldn't stand him. She squeezed Yule and said Yule was looking forward to it too. Yule wobbled, dazed from the sudden contact. Shiki asked if she was okay with joining a 7th-floor slime hunt. Ruruka said sure, as long as she got to tag along. Ruruka said she'd heard there had been some demand lately for slime drops. Shiki tensed up. She might have figured out why he wanted it. Ruruka just smiled. Ruruka confirmed the plan. Slime hunting, 7th floor, tomorrow. She turned at the door and asked if she could stay with him tonight. Shiki's mind jumped ahead. She meant sharing a room. Ruruka laughed, said good night, and closed her own door. Shiki stood there. He'd assumed they'd be in the same room. Yule tugged at him and said they should go to sleep too. Shiki realized Ruruka had deliberately worded it to trip him up. Shiki went back to his room. Ruruka thought to herself that Shiki got flustered so easily. She found it entertaining. Then something small knocked into her from the hallway and yelped. Yule asked how it felt. Shiki told her it felt really good. He told her she didn't have to push herself and that it was okay to stop. Yule said no, she was doing it for him. Ruruka burst in and told Shiki to stop right there. He promised not to lay a finger on Yule. Yule, confused, asked if something was wrong. Shiki explained that Yule was giving him a shoulder massage. Ruruka froze. Yule tilted her head and asked if she'd caught Ruruka's interest. Ruruka went quiet. Shiki told Ruruka this was payback for the trick she pulled the night before. Ruruka shot back that it was nothing, then shut herself back in her room. Shiki chuckled. With Yule there, they couldn't share a room anyway. Yule offered to keep going with the massage. Shiki said yes please. Ruruka's frustrated sounds drifted through the wall. The next day arrived. In the labyrinth, Ruruka asked Shiki if he always patted Yule like that. He said yes and asked if there was a problem. Ruruka walked ahead, saying she understood. It was a reward for Yule after defeating monsters. Then she added that it made her feel a little left out, and asked what he meant by that. Shiki wondered if she was setting him up again. Yule watched quietly and wondered to herself. Yule asked if Ruruka also wanted to be patted by Shiki. Ruruka went bright red and stumbled over her words. The two of them ended up face to face for a moment. Ruruka looked away. The group pushed forward and neared the 7th floor. Shiki thought back. Ruruka had always been casual about physical contact, and he'd assumed it was just her way of getting what she wanted. But after seeing her reaction just now, he wasn't so sure. Then again, this was Ruruka. It was probably just teasing. Thanks to Ruruka and Yule, the slime hunt went smoothly. The slimes vanished when defeated, which was a shame, but the drops stayed behind. The jelly was going to solve Shiki's problem. A pile of slime jelly. Shiki finally had it. Yule squeezed a piece and said it was elastic and soft. She told Shiki to try it too. He grabbed a handful, relieved. Yule said it felt nice. Shiki agreed, still holding it. Ruruka said they should sell all of it. Shiki went pale. She seemed to have no idea what he actually wanted it for and thought it was just a cooking ingredient. It was too late to stop her now. He reminded himself that he only needed one piece. He could let the rest go. Shiki had secured one. He slipped away from the group to deal with his personal problem while they were occupied. He rushed to get back before anyone noticed and ran straight into someone, knocking them both over. Shiki apologized and grabbed whoever he'd collided with. The sensation caught him off guard. He looked up. It was Eris, his old boss. She stared at him in shock. Yule appeared around the corner and called out his name, just as surprised. Shiki and Elise ran into each other by chance. Before either could react, he accidentally groped her. She flew back from the impact while he stumbled, and the whole thing ended with a quick apology. Once things settled, Shiki looked her over and asked what she was doing out here instead of at the clinic. Elise told him it was none of his business and turned away. Shiki stood still for a moment, then headed off with his party. His companions called out that they were leaving without him. He said he was coming. He glanced back once, then said nothing more. The group said their goodbyes to Lelouka. She mentioned she needed to head back soon, then turned around and pulled Shiki into a hug, telling him they should go out again sometime. He laughed awkwardly and agreed. Yuel watched from the side, a little surprised. Lelouka waved and took off, laughing as she left. Yuel muttered something under her breath. Shiki looked over and asked what was wrong. She said it was nothing. At dinner, the group sat around a table. Someone told Shiki he'd already made it to the 7th floor, which was pretty impressive. He gave the credit to Yuel and said he was just staying back and doing nothing. The other person said Yuel could fight freely because she knew Shiki was behind her. Yuel smiled and said he wasn't half bad. Someone asked if they were celebrating something. Yuel said yes, and added there was something else she wanted to mention. Yuel announced it was a celebration for beating the slimes. Someone asked why slimes specifically. Another person quietly called out to Shiki. Shiki, a little flustered, thought back. They had all agreed not to bring up that topic. The reason was to protect his image. He had secretly picked up slime jelly, which doubled as a certain kind of adult item, and the last thing he needed was for Yuel to find out. With her personality, things could go very wrong if she did. The restaurant was full of waitresses, and Shiki didn't know where to look. Yuel noticed them too and quietly wondered if she should be wearing something like that. She pointed to the ones with the shorter skirts. Shiki overheard her and said he'd definitely like to see her in something like that, and that she'd look cute in it. Yuel froze. Someone else agreed it was perfect timing since Yuel had been wanting a skirt anyway, and said Shiki should give her a proper reward for her hard work. Yuel hesitated, unsure if it would suit her. Shiki told her she was already cute as she was. He insisted it was his way of saying thanks, and that she should have more confidence in herself. Yuel lit up. Yuel got so flustered she started rambling and nearly blacked out. She managed to pull herself together and declared she would do her best. Shiki told her to do her best, though he was already zoning out a little. Yuel cheered back enthusiastically. Then Shiki passed out face first onto the table. Yuel panicked and called out to him. He had fallen asleep at the table. The others noted it with mild resignation. The next morning, Shiki woke up and checked his wallet. It was empty. He'd drunk way too much the night before and spent everything. He stood outside the dungeon entrance with Yuel, thinking through the problem. He had promised to buy her a skirt. He needed money. Up to the 7th floor, the most valuable drop came from one specific monster. The 7th floor boss, the huge slime, king of slimes, had a rare chance of dropping the slime's crown when defeated. Collectors paid up to 200,000 zeni for it. It was a tempting amount. Yuel called out to him, having just wiped out all the regular slimes on the floor. She was proud of herself. Shiki thought it over. Yuel was great against small monsters, but the huge slime was many times bigger than anything they'd faced. Too risky. Just beyond the boss room door, Shiki pictured what would happen if the huge slime landed its full weight on Yuel. That was enough to settle it. Yuel stood ready, telling him she would do whatever it took for his sake. She said she was ready to go in any time. Shiki told her to forget it. Taking on the boss with just the two of them would be a mistake. Yuel accepted his call without arguing. They ended up outside a clinic. The money from his on-call healing work wasn't much, but Shiki figured it was enough to save up for Yuel's gift. He told Yuel he was going in to fix his hair. She called after him just before he stepped inside. Yuel let him go. The door had barely closed when Lelouka appeared and asked if Shiki was free. She said she was hurt and asked him to heal her. Shiki greeted her, noted she was back as a customer, and told her he hoped she'd be paying properly this time. Lelouka told him to check the injury first, and they could talk money after. Lelouka pointed out the injury and said it was very small. Shiki crossed his arms and told her the fee depended on the spell used, not the size of the injury. She acted put out by his coldness. Shiki kept his expression flat. He knew this was her usual trick to push into a negotiation. Even so, he found himself thinking about it. Shiki thought back to Lelouka's expression at the labyrinth. He didn't think it was just an act. He wanted to know how she really felt about him, and decided this was his chance to find out. His plan: use the examination as cover and see how far things went, and get payback for last time when he'd been interrupted. Lelouka lifted her top and told Shiki to take a closer look at the injury. He leaned in and said he couldn't quite make it out. She had said that. He moved close, but there was nothing there. Shiki stared, visibly flustered. He thought she was just making excuses for an excuse to see him. Lelouka looked a little embarrassed and admitted she couldn't help it. Shiki blinked. She had come all this way just to see him. He reached toward her. She reacted. He caught her. Their hands touched. Then the door burst open. Yahello rushed in, announcing she was back. She stopped when she saw them. Shiki turned to face Yahello, his hands still on Lelouka's shoulders. Yahello stared back at him, wide-eyed and silent. Shiki's mind went blank. He had completely forgotten about Yahello. He needed to say something. Lelouka stood between them, stiff, and told him in no uncertain terms that going as far as possible was not something she had agreed to. Shiki panicked. If Yahello lost faith in him now, it was over. Shiki tried to play it cool, muttering that this was a very difficult treatment and that direct contact was necessary. He looked at Lelouka and asked if she understood, then begged her to back him up. Lelouka snapped out of it and agreed, a little flustered. Shiki grabbed her arm and pulled her along. Yahello made a small sound of surprise. Lelouka asked if that would be enough. Yahello called out to Shiki, confused. Shiki tried to push Lelouka forward, panicking internally. Lelouka got dragged into the mess. Yahello started crying, unable to process what she'd walked in on. Shiki completely lost it. Yahello broke down sobbing. Shiki ran over to her and apologized, saying he never meant to make her cry. Shiki told Yahello he was really sorry. Lelouka stepped in and cleared things up. She said she wasn't trying to take Shiki away. What happened was a medical technique called palpation, and she was just borrowing him for a bit. Yahello blinked. She repeated the word slowly, not quite sure what to make of it. Yahello asked if that was really true. Shiki nodded and said it was a very difficult treatment. He needed to check carefully for anything unusual inside the body. He thought to himself that he was sorry for the ridiculous excuse, but he had no other way out. Lelouka leaned toward Yahello and suggested she take a good look. Lelouka pointed out that there wasn't a scratch left. Shiki added it was because he healed her. Lelouka confirmed it and said Shiki's magic was amazing. Yahello went quiet for a moment, then said she was glad. Yahello buried her face against Shiki and said she was so glad. He stood there, a little stunned. Shiki told Lelouka she didn't need to pay, and that they were heading home. Yahello was still sniffling. Lelouka thanked them and said goodbye. Shiki and Lelouka exchanged a look. They had managed to pull it off, barely. That night, Yahello sat quietly on the bed and said nothing. Shiki watched her from across the room, uneasy. He wondered if she had figured out the lie. He tried to break the silence. Yahello turned and told him it hurt. She said her body kept aching. Shiki snapped to attention and used X heal right away. Yahello said the heal wasn't working. She said it had started ever since she saw him with Lelouka. Her chest felt tight, and it wouldn't go away. Shiki went still. He knew what that was. Yahello said the feeling was jealousy, or maybe anxiety. She said it was the kind his healing magic couldn't fix. Then she looked up at him and made a request. She asked if he could do the palpation on her too. Yahello asked Shiki to do the palpation on her too. She looked up at him, waiting. Shiki went quiet. He knew it wouldn't actually fix what was wrong with her. What she was dealing with was closer to a mental thing than a physical one. But if he turned her down now, he worried she might lose her confidence for good. Shiki thought it over, then told her he got it. He moved closer and reached out toward her. Yahello tensed up slightly, but didn't pull back. He was careful. He knew there was a line he shouldn't cross with her. Shiki called her name softly and pulled her into a hug. He asked if she remembered what he'd told her before. Yahello went still in his arms. Shiki looked down at her, steady and calm. Shiki knew he tended to lose his head around Elise and Lelouka, but with Yahello it was different. There was a line he would never cross with her. What he wanted was simple, for her to keep smiling. She had come to him because she was overwhelmed, so the first thing he needed to do was calm her down. He reminded her that they'd always be together. Yahello said nothing, but her grip on him tightened slightly. Yahello asked if he was giving her a present because she'd worked hard, and said she'd work even harder and asked if he'd reward her more when the time came. Shiki said sure. Yuel said she was all right now. She said goodnight to him and stepped out. That night, Shiki couldn't sleep. He lay awake wondering if he'd made the right call. He pictured Yuel's smile. Then he sat up suddenly. Yuel was gone. Shiki searched the whole inn and couldn't find her. He ran out into the street and stopped someone to ask if they'd seen a dark elf girl. They pointed him toward the labyrinth. She had headed that way about 10 minutes ago. Shiki took off running. He reached the dungeon entrance and his stomach dropped. She had gone inside alone, in the middle of the night. He thought back to earlier. She had said she wanted to work while he slept, so she wouldn't be a burden. He had told her to do her best. He had sent her straight into the dungeon. A bird-type monster dove at Shiki inside the labyrinth. He barely knocked it back and took a hit doing it. The monster crashed to the floor. He couldn't even handle a small monster on his own. He used heal to patch himself up and kept moving. He had to get to Yuel. Shiki pushed forward but got tripped up and went down hard. He hit the floor, and before he could get up, a giant ant was right on top of him. He scrambled to his feet, bleeding. The giant ant closed in fast. Shiki healed his legs and told himself to run. He kept his eyes on the tunnel ahead and thought about everything waiting for him. Elise still hated him. He still hadn't heard how Lelouka really felt. And most of all, he couldn't leave Yuel alone. He wasn't dying here. The giant ant lunged. Shiki stood his ground, threw everything into X heal, and blasted it. The monster went down hard. Someone appeared at his side, stunned. Two of his companions had followed him in. They told him he looked terrible and asked what he was doing in there alone. Shiki told them Yuel had gone in ahead and could be heading for the boss room. They said they got it and moved fast. Outside, one of the party members said Yuel should be at the bar. Shiki, banged up and exhausted, had no idea what he meant. The companion repeated himself. Shiki lost it for a second. Yuel had told Shiki her reward. She wanted to wear the waitress outfit. She had also said she would work while he slept so she wouldn't bother him, and Shiki had told her to do her best. His companion pointed out that Shiki had basically sent her off himself. The other one noted Shiki was probably too drunk to have heard any of it. Shiki just laughed weakly. Shiki was furious with himself. His companions told him they look out for each other and not to worry about it, and that a drink hits better after doing something good. They also told him to deal with his ruined, blood-soaked state before he scared Yuel. He agreed quietly. The blood wouldn't wash out. Shiki decided to hide the clothes for now and stepped out to deal with it. The door burst open. Yuel appeared in the waitress outfit, eyes wide. Yuel panicked when she saw him and asked if he was hurt. Shiki told her fast that the blood wasn't his. It came from the monsters, and he was fine. Yuel stared at him. Geyser had already told her that Shiki had gone into the labyrinth alone to find her. Yuel started to apologize, saying she hadn't thought things through. Shiki waved it off and told her it was a misunderstanding on his end too. They were both safe, and that was all that mattered. Shiki told Yuel she didn't need to help and that he could clean up himself. Yuel said his clothes would get dirty and that she would strip down to help. Shiki froze. Yuel was already one step ahead of him. She worked quietly and told him his back was still sticky with blood. Yuel cleaned his back carefully. She thanked him and said it had scared her when she heard he went into the labyrinth alone. Seeing him covered in blood had hurt to look at. But now, she said, she was really happy. Yuel said she was happy because now she knew how much Shiki cared about her. Shiki sat quietly, thinking that maybe things had turned out better this way. He told her no more going to the labyrinth alone. She agreed. A few days passed. Yuel had picked up a part-time job at the bar, and Shiki was relieved her shift had been changed to evenings, so she wasn't losing sleep. Hearing about her day over dinner had become a regular thing between them. The whole mess with the waitress outfit had finally settled down. That evening, Yuel mentioned the new waitress at the bar. The owner explained she had been struggling with money and was being forced to sell her home, so they brought her on to help. Her clinic work alone wasn't covering the debt. Shiki felt like he'd heard this before. He asked Yuel for the person's name. It was Elise. She appeared at the door, calm and composed. Yuel introduced Shiki to her cheerfully. Elise said it had been a while. She looked at Shiki and noted that Yuel had spoken highly of him, though she had wondered what kind of person her master actually was. Shiki managed to say it was nice to see her. Shiki told Elise it might be too late, but if there was anything he could do, she just had to ask. He knew he owed her more than just a meal and a place to stay. The debt from his past behavior with her still sat with him, and even if it made him look calculating, he genuinely wanted to help. Elise said the debts existed before he ever arrived. She acknowledged that his discounted rates and the bath incident had also frustrated her, but the clinic had been struggling from the start. She said she had made peace with selling it long ago. Elise had a younger sister studying at a school in the capital to become a knight. To cover her sister's tuition and living costs, Elise had quietly borrowed money on her own. She said her sister was her only family, and she had wanted to support her. That was why this was her problem to deal with. She couldn't bring anyone else into it. Shiki asked how much she owed and said he would help pay it back. He pointed out that the clinic was Elise's home. She reacted but held herself steady. Elise said she had already decided to sell. She said it was fine and that she had no regrets. Then she stepped back inside. Shiki stopped at the door. No regrets, he didn't buy it. If that were true, then why was she crying? He called her name quietly. Yahello mentioned that Elise had lost her parents in an accident a long time ago. Shiki stood outside the clinic and understood. Elise had pushed herself to sell the one place that still held her parents' memory, all for her sister, the only family she had left. There was no way she felt nothing about it. He realized he had known almost nothing about Elise until now. Shiki turned to Yahello and told her they were going. Yahello asked where. He looked toward the labyrinth. Dangerous, full of monsters, and full of money. He said they were going to earn back Elise's clinic with their own hands. Yahello locked in without hesitation. Shiki thought back to how it all started. The reason he was able to get by in this world came down to one thing: meeting Elise. A stranger with no background had shown up at her door and begged to work there. From her side, he must have looked completely suspicious. Even so, she had taken him in. When Shiki first arrived, he had a bloodstain on his clothes from before he was reincarnated. Elise noticed and offered to heal him. He didn't know the word at the time. She cast heal. The light she released was far stronger than a basic heal should have been. He later figured it was because he had no control over his magic output back then. After that, word got around about his healing ability, and that was how his second life in this world began. Yahello confirmed the plan. The money to buy back Elise's clinic had to come from the labyrinth. She said to leave the fighting to her. Shiki said he already had a plan. Yahello asked what it was. The target was the huge slime, 7th floor boss. Its rare crown drop sold for a high price. Shiki laid it out confidently. Yahello pointed out that he had already said 2 people wasn't enough. He admitted he'd forgotten that part. His actual plan: bring enough people to make it work. With enough fighters, nothing was impossible. The problem was money. Hiring people cost money, and even with a lot of crowns, splitting the reward would leave little for them. He needed over 600,000 zeni before the auction, and that was 6 days away. His clinic earnings wouldn't cover it. He sat with his head down, wondering if he should just gamble everything at the rumored den on the outskirts. Yahello asked if he was okay. Shiki decided to step outside and clear his head. He told Yahello he'd push through. A member of Lelouka's party named Sarah greeted him and offered to bring water. He recognized her and said it had been a while. Sarah told Shiki to stop staring at her with that look, or she'd set him on fire. Shiki flinched. The other one with her was Fran. Shiki asked where Lelouka was. Fran said she wasn't there today. Shiki wondered if Lelouka was still bothered by what had happened at the bar. Fran said both she and Lelouka were nosy and that Sarah told Fran to stop. Shiki asked what brought them by. Sarah said Shiki's healing reputation had spread. People were saying he could restore a lost limb in seconds. Shiki figured his party members had talked. He thought he should have asked them to keep quiet. Sarah said they had a request for him. Shiki wasn't thrilled about being well known, but he noted that Lelouka had come to him several times too, so maybe it was fate. He braced himself. Sarah asked Shiki to join their subjugation force. She said the pay was good and they'd compensate him properly. Shiki turned it down. The pay wasn't enough to buy back Elise's clinic. He noted the subjugation job sounded more like night work than adventurer work and wondered if Sarah and Fran had a connection to the knights. He said he'd think about it, but for now Elise's clinic came first, and he needed a way to get adventurers without spending money. Fran said Shiki didn't need a healer. She could handle any monster without a scratch. Sarah told Fran to stop being rude. Fran kept going, claiming that healers who charged too much just pressured people who couldn't afford it into paying with their bodies. Shiki thought that was a bit much, but he wasn't going to deny it either. Then the last part hit him. Pay with your body. That was it. Yuel came back with water and found Shiki's hair completely blown out from excitement. She asked what had happened. Shiki explained he had come up with a way to earn money, and then his head had basically exploded. He was glad to be a healer. Yuel just offered to bring him a comb. Shiki said first they needed to find 8. Shiki found 8 at the bar and explained his plan. Find adventurers who had been hurt by giant ants and couldn't afford healing. 8 asked if Shiki was trying to get more patients. Shiki admitted his reputation had gotten out because someone couldn't keep quiet. He glanced at his party members. They apologized quickly. 8 asked what Shiki planned to do with the broke adventurers. Shiki said the pay worked out fine. It was just a bluff, but a useful one. Shiki told the injured adventurers the deal. He would heal their wounds fully, no money needed. In return, they would follow his orders for 1 day. He asked for a few tanks up front and 2 long-range attackers in the back. Beginners were fine too. The adventurers listened. Shiki said the plan needed one specific thing, and the boss appeared in his mind. Shiki's plan, a front line that could be healed over and over, no matter how many times they went down. He called it a meat shield that could always get back up. The adventurers agreed to it. One of them called out to remind Shiki of his promise. Another asked if 1 day of work really covered their healing fee. They pushed forward anyway, fired up. Friend made it clear she was only there to protect Sarah and not for any other reason. Sarah joined because a long-range attacker was essential to the plan. Shiki owed Sarah 1 for showing up. He thought to himself that someday he'd wipe that cold look off Fran's face. Yuel called out. The boss was coming. Everyone got into position. The huge slime slammed into the front line. One of the tanks took a hit. Shiki cast area heal to keep everyone up. Fran moved in and launched an attack on the boss. Shiki called out the opening. Fran hit the boss with fireball. Shiki spotted something inside the blast. He called out to Yuel. Was that the core? Yuel confirmed it. The plan worked. Shiki had spent time gathering adventurers who agreed to his terms. Heal their wounds in exchange for 1 day as his shield. For Sarah, they agreed to cover each other's subjugation jobs as well. Fran just tagged along. The deal was literally pay with your body, and Shiki called it a win-win. The slime's crown dropped. Yuel picked it up and called out to Shiki. Each crown sold for 200,000 zeni. He needed at least 5 by end of day. Today was also the 7th day of his self-imposed rule, which he had kept despite every temptation this world had thrown at him. He silently asked for luck. They kept pushing. Area heal and fireball rang out through the dungeon. The following day, Elise stood reading a document. The clinic had sold for 1.5 million zeni. Shiki watched from a distance, eye twitching. Elise told herself she had to stop dwelling on it. Yuel urged her not to give up. Shiki appeared and asked what was going on, then if she had figured out where she'd be working next. Elise asked what brought him there. Shiki said he heard the auction had ended, then asked if she was managing. She said she still had her clinic earnings to get by on, so she would be fine for now. Shiki told her to look at something. Shiki held out a document. Elise asked what it was. He said it was the ownership proof for the clinic, and that he had won the auction. Elise went still. Shiki watched her. Shiki had pulled it off, the rare drop, the clinic, and now a real shot at winning Elise over. He opened his arms and told her to leap into them. Elise stared at him and asked how he had been flat broke just the other day. Shiki froze at her reaction. Elise stepped back and apologized, saying she was acting strange today. Shiki thought it through. She had no choice but to sell the clinic after all that hard work, and then he had swooped in and gotten it back in just a few days. He figured she was frustrated. He decided to give her space. Yuel had pushed hard the day before too, and was still asleep. Shiki thought she deserved another reward. He went out back to throw away the blood-stained clothes from the labyrinth run. He found the trash area and reached into his bag. A voice behind him called his name. It was Elise. Elise spotted the blood-stained clothes and asked if they had something to do with what he had done for her. Shiki started to come up with a cover story, something about stumbling on a valuable item by chance. Then he stopped himself. From her reaction, she had clearly read the situation wrong and thought he had done something reckless on his own. He figured letting the misunderstanding stand might actually help her come to terms with everything, and he could already feel her warming up to him. She asked quietly why he would go that far for her. Shiki said it went without saying. He did it to pay back what she had done for him. Elise looked at him for a long moment, then quietly called him an idiot. Her expression wasn't angry. She almost looked like she was going to smile. Shiki felt like things were finally going his way. He told Elise he wanted to make a fresh start. He apologized for always doing as he pleased without thinking, and for not noticing she had been struggling. He told her his time at the clinic had made him realize he was partly responsible, and that getting the ownership proof back was his way of making up for it. He asked if she would accept it. Elise said that honestly, she had always seen something of her father in Shiki, his skill with healing magic, and how he treated people. That was part of why she could never just let go of what he'd done. He wasn't her father, she knew that, but he was just himself. Shiki realized she had gotten swept up in the moment, but it didn't change the fact that what he had done to her before was wrong, and he knew it. Elise leaned in and quietly thanked him. Shiki held still. Yuel watched from across the yard, fists tight, clearly bothered. Elise pulled back slightly, almost amused. Shiki told himself this was it. Normally, she wouldn't even let him close, but today was different. Meanwhile, he silently asked Yuel to stay asleep just a little longer. The others showed up and made a scene, laughing about the crowns and teasing Shiki. Elise and Shiki pulled apart. Elise asked quietly if he had made the money by using others as shields while staying back to cast heals. Shiki had nothing to say to that. Elise confronted him properly, and Shiki came clean that the blood on the clothes had nothing to do with her, and that he had used her misunderstanding to get closer to her. He braced himself. Elise said there was nothing he needed to apologize for. She asked if she had lost all faith in him. It was fine, she said, all that for nothing. Yuel stepped in, and Elise reached out to her. She said she understood, that he did it out of consideration for her, and that he had given everything he had for her sake. The two of them stood together in the fading light. Shiki suggested heading back. Elise agreed. He said Yuel was waiting. They walked side by side. And then, back to their clinic. Yuel stared blankly ahead. Someone had just told her they were all moving to the clinic, and that Elise would be living with them from now on. The two of them confirmed it. Starting today, the three of them would be sharing the same place. Yuel stood outside the clinic, looking up at it, still processing the news. Yuel took it in quietly. She hadn't known Elise long, but she'd already grown attached to her. The change had come fast. Shiki explained that he'd be working out of the clinic going forward and would cut back on house call appointments. He made a note to inform the bar master too. Elise turned to Yuel and asked if she'd been a burden with all this. Yuel shook her head. Then Elise pulled Yuel close, and Yuel's face went straight into her chest. Yuel paused for a second, then broke into a wide smile, fists clenched. The surprise had caught her off guard, but she was fully on board. She'd follow wherever her master led. Elise told Yuel she'd be sleeping in the same room as her from now on. Yuel lit up. Shiki hesitated. Elise pointed out that Yuel couldn't keep sharing a bed with him forever, and the clinic had plenty of empty beds anyway. Shiki quietly agreed she had a point. He had no intention of doing anything. She was still a kid, but Elise wasn't wrong. Things couldn't stay the way they were. Yuel glanced over, a little uncertain. Shiki tried to recover. He suggested that if Yuel got lonely, she could always sleep with Elise instead. He played it cool. Yuel's face lit up completely. She announced that Master had already promised to hold her once she grew up, so there was no problem with them all sleeping together. Elise went still. She looked at Shiki and asked him to repeat what Yuel just said. Shiki started to respond. It didn't go well. Elise was furious. Shiki could tell immediately. She fixed him with a cold stare and asked him to explain himself. Shiki thought fast. He knew she wasn't jealous. It was just how she was. She held firm standards about this kind of thing, especially with someone as young as Yuel. But that look on her face was bad. It was the look of someone who thought he'd tricked an innocent kid into trusting him for his own benefit. He couldn't let her hate him again. Not after everything it took to patch things up with her. He told her to wait and hear him out. Shiki insisted it was a misunderstanding. He had made the promise, but only to avoid hurting the feelings of a girl going through a confusing time. That was the kind of person he saw himself as. Elise didn't look convinced. She said it wasn't a misunderstanding. Yuel froze. It wasn't a misunderstanding? Shiki scrambled. He went back and forth. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, and couldn't land on anything solid. He had no idea how to get out of this. He needed something, anything. Shiki put his hands on Yuel's head and told Elise there was a complicated reason behind it, that he couldn't explain right now. Elise called him out, clearly not buying it, then immediately complimented herself out loud. Shiki pointed out she wasn't fooling anyone. Elise crossed her arms and let it go for now. She could see that Yahello genuinely cared for him. Still, she told him it wasn't a good idea for Yahello to keep sharing a bed with a grown man. If Yahello got lonely, she was welcome to sleep beside Elise instead. Yahello went quiet. Yahello had never once asked for anything just for herself. Elise said what she said because she cared about that. She saw it. Yahello had figured it out too. That's why she looked stuck. Shiki watched her face and felt it. He'd been a fool to just stand there while she looked like that. Shiki pulled Yahello into a hug and apologized. He told her they'd sleep together, now and always. Yahello grabbed back, overjoyed. Elise watched from the side, a little flustered. She pointed out that she was the one who was supposed to say something like that. Shiki gave her a look and asked her to please just go along with it. Elise sighed and said fine, if Yahello wanted it that way. The three of them ended up in the same room. Shiki lay there quietly while Elise sat up, looking like she was about to say something about sharing a bed. Shiki had assumed that's what she meant when she agreed. But Elise wasn't the type to open up that easily. She'd gotten swept up in the moment, and now she'd pulled back. He thought about it as he stared at the ceiling. Elise had taken a small step toward him. That was enough for now. Shiki made a mental note, no wandering into the wrong bed on the way back from the bathroom. He meant it. The next afternoon, the clinic had clear skies and no patients. Elise had baked cookies and brought them out. Shiki and Yahello both accepted eagerly. The clinic was open for business. That was the plan anyway. Not a single patient had shown up. Yahello was happily eating cookies. Shiki stared at the empty waiting area. Elise had written to her old regulars, but the clinic's location, far from the labyrinth, was a problem. If things kept up like this, they'd be in financial trouble again. Shiki decided they'd head into town. He'd shop for supplies with Elise and try to track down some adventurer contacts to spread the word. He also figured he'd bring patients back if he could find any. The clinic sat near the edge of town, which might actually work in their favor with outside adventurers passing through. But for now, they headed out. He asked Yahello if there was anything she wanted to pick up while they were there. Shiki told Yahello she could spend her wages however she wanted. She said there was a shop she had in mind. It turned out to be a lingerie shop. Yahello pointed at an adult-styled set on display and said she wanted to wear something like that for her master. Elise stepped in immediately and told her that kind of underwear was for adults. Shiki, now drawing stares from the people around them, quietly offered to pay for something else instead, something he thought was cute and suited her better. Yahello tried on the option Shiki picked. She asked if it looked good. Shiki noticed the design was a bit open in the middle and felt uneasy about where this was heading. He asked if she wanted to try a different one. She kept going back to the revealing styles. Shiki shut it down and declared loudly that he was only her guardian. The people nearby stared. Then Yahello explained that someone named Geyser had told her wearing that kind of underwear would bring her closer to her master. Shiki told her to never listen to anything that person said again. They finished up and left the shop. Shiki confirmed they'd gotten what they came for. Yahello asked if they could stop somewhere else. He silently hoped it wasn't another lingerie shop. It was an equipment shop. Shiki relaxed. Yahello picked up a bracelet and handed it to him, telling him to think of it as a charm. Shiki said it looked expensive. She brushed it off and said it was fine. He asked if she was really spending her whole salary on it. She explained it was a magic tool. It could block one life-threatening attack from a monster. The bracelet would break after activating. Yahello said she also wanted to give her master a present. Shiki was caught off guard. He asked if there was a different color available. There was. He bought one and put his on, then looked at hers. They matched. Yahello held the bracelet close, happy. That night, back at the clinic, Shiki held his bracelet and thought about it. He felt bad being the only one who'd received a gift, so he'd gone back and bought a matching one. He hoped the day it was ever needed would never come. He kept it on. Yahello would be sad if it broke. A knock came at the door. Maybe an emergency patient. Elise went to check. Shiki followed. It was Leluka, and she had Fran and Sarah with her, both unconscious. She was asking Shiki for help. Elise cast heal on them right away. Their condition began to stabilize. Elise told Leluka there would be no discount this time. Leluka said she'd pay the full fee, no questions asked, and the extra fee too. Just please save them. Shiki watched. Leluka hadn't been to the clinic since the last incident. She'd probably been avoiding it. But her teammates were what mattered now. Elise treated them without charging extra. She asked Lelouka to tell her what had happened. That would help her figure out the cause. Lelouka explained. They'd been dealing with kobolds just outside of town, trying to get back before dark. They got chased. She got separated from the other two. By the time they regrouped at sunset, Fran and Sarah were already in bad shape. Shiki noted the kobold population had been growing lately. There were a lot of guild requests posted about it. He wondered if something had happened to them while they were apart. Elise guessed the cause might be a monster, or possibly eating something like a strange mushroom. She sent Shiki to fetch documents while she re-examined them. Shiki noted that while more monsters in the area wasn't exactly good news, the clinic's location near the edge of town meant more adventurers passing through. It could mean more patients. He wondered if there was a reason behind the kobold increase. When he came back, Lelouka was still there. Elise told him to wait outside for now. He stepped back, surprised to see Lelouka at the clinic again. Elise was in the middle of treating Fran and Sarah, who were still dazed and out of it. Shiki watched from the doorway. Elise asked him to please continue on, then pointed out that the situation needed handling. Shiki gave a thumbs up and let them be. Shiki stepped in and told everyone not to mind him. He needed to check their condition. Elise asked him to look away while she worked. She explained she was loosening their clothing because it looked like they were having trouble breathing. Shiki turned around. Someone muttered that Elise's own situation wasn't much different. Shiki confirmed that, yes, it was a problem. Elise examined the marks on their skin and confirmed they'd been poisoned by a monster. She called for the documents. Shiki brought them over. She matched the marks to an entry. The crankite turtle, a large monster capable of releasing poisonous fog. Shiki said the name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. It had been listed on a subjugation request that Sarah brought in before. Elise said she could handle the poison with dispoison. She cast it. The kobold population increasing made sense now. That monster was the cause, pushing them toward the town. Shiki saw his chance and cast dispoison. Fran had been hostile toward him since their first meeting, and getting her out of this would put her in his debt. Fran and Sarah came around. Lelouka grabbed them both, relieved. Fran and Sarah thanked Shiki and Elise. Shiki thought to himself that Fran probably wouldn't admit it directly, and she didn't. Fran started to say something to Shiki. She got partway through, then Sarah stepped in and finished the thought for her, pointing out that during the fight with the giant slime, Shiki had kept using healing magic without ever running dry. And this time, he'd cleared the poison from both of them without breaking a sweat. Fran grabbed Sarah and told her to stop. Sarah laughed it off. Shiki moved on to the main point. He told them he needed their help. The crankite turtle had to be dealt with, and his healing magic would be essential. He asked them to let him join the subjugation. The day arrived. Shiki and Yahello headed out to join the subjugation force. Elise saw them off from outside the clinic. She told Shiki to be careful and not cause any trouble out there. Shiki said he'd be fine. Elise's parting concern was specifically that he not end up in custody for doing something inappropriate. Shiki pointed out that was a specific worry to have. Shiki said he wouldn't, probably. Yahello stared at him. He added that he had Yahello with him anyway. Elise wasn't fully reassured, but she held it together. She said the monster needed to be dealt with before it caused more harm to the town. She understood that. Yahello straightened up and said she'd protect her master. Shiki nodded. Elise told Shiki his healing magic was meant for more than just a small clinic. It deserved a wider stage. Yahello and Shiki both reacted to that. The wind picked up. A hollow sound passed through. Shiki turned and told Elise to come back safely. She said of course. Then someone pointed out that her shirt was already struggling to contain what it was holding. Elise didn't catch the comment. Lelouka was already waiting outside. She'd wanted to see Shiki badly enough that she'd shown up early and waited. She noticed the bracelet on his wrist and asked about it. Shiki said he and Yahello had picked it up together. Lelouka went quiet for a moment, then pulled out something of her own and held it out to him. She said it was from her. It was an earring, a magic stone that would attach on its own. Shiki put it on. Lelouka stepped back and said they matched now. Shiki asked if she was trying to play him. She said she wasn't. Lelouka mentioned it was Shiki's first time fighting outside of town, so she just wanted to give him something for protection. Shiki asked why Fran was the one recruiting people for the subjugation force instead of leaving it to the knights. Lelouka said she hadn't mentioned it yet. Fran was the daughter of the town's lord. Everyone was present. The group set off to take down the crank-height turtle. The group moved out. The sky looked like rain was coming. Yuel spotted the town from a high point and was struck by how it looked spread out below them. Lelouka noticed and complimented her eye. She offered to tell Yuel about the town's history if she wanted. Yuel said she'd like that. Lelouka introduced Fran's full name, Fran Leluna Merhiltz, and explained what happened. Fran's parents had arranged a marriage for her. She wasn't interested. When they pushed, she fired a fireball at her marriage partner. She wanted to be recognized as the next lord on her own terms, not through a match. Her father threw her out and told her to sort out her attitude toward men first. Her parents still worried, so they sent Sarah, her childhood friend, to travel with her. Fran became an adventurer and sometimes helped the knights with their duties. The injury from the fireball could be healed with magic, but still. Shiki figured Fran's reason for calling him in was to have adventurers and knights witness her ability firsthand, to prove her worth beyond her dislike of men. Sarah had probably called out to Shiki specifically so there'd be more people around to help keep Fran safe. They heard from a scout. The crank-height turtle had been spotted near the river. The group moved in on its location. The monster noticed them. Someone shouted to stick to the plan. Shiki muttered that bikini armor might have helped them stay hidden. Nobody responded to that. Lelouka called out that everything was riding on Shiki. The plan was set. Lelouka and the knights drew its attention from the front and acted as a decoy. The mages and archers attacked from the rear. Shiki and the healers stayed close to the front line to treat anyone caught in the poison fog, which was unavoidable given how close the front line had to stay. The plan worked. The crank-height turtle was locked in place and couldn't do anything. Its poison fog was weaker than what had hit Fran and Sarah. Keeping it pinned had limited its output. Shiki asked Fran if she was ready. She was mid-chant. He told her the fight might be over before she got to use her fireball. Yuel noticed something was off. The monster hadn't moved from its spot the entire fight, just absorbing hit after hit. Shiki agreed it felt strange. It was too one-sided. He said they still had to finish it here before it got closer to town. Yuel said it wasn't that. Something else felt wrong. Before anyone could respond, a signal burst from the monster. Shiki ordered everyone to fall back. Fran stepped forward and said she'd deliver the finishing blow. Fran raised her weapon and called out Thunder Ring. The attack hit. The dust settled. Fran turned to Yuel and asked if she'd witnessed her power. Yuel was distracted. Shiki stared at the wreckage and asked if it was down. It wasn't. The crank-height turtle lurched back up. Its attack swept out and caught Fran and Sarah, sending them down. Lelouka shouted their names. The monster launched another attack. Shiki yelled at everyone to move. Fran and Sarah were frozen. Shiki shoved them out of the way. Shiki threw himself over Fran and Sarah as the attack came down. The impact hit the ground just beside them. The dust settled. Someone asked if it was finally dead this time. Shiki lay there catching his breath. Yuel stared, wide-eyed. Sarah thanked Shiki and Yuel for saving them. Fran snapped that she hadn't asked to be saved and told him to let go. Shiki asked why he'd done it anyway. He said it was simple. They were right in front of him, and he thought he could get them out in time. He also mentioned, calmly, that she was easy to carry because there wasn't much weight up top. Fran went very still. Lelouka called out to check if everyone was okay. The monster stirred again. Shiki noticed the eggs near the nest and figured it out. The monster hadn't moved from that spot the whole fight because it was guarding them. Fran's attack had burned the eggs. That's what set it off and sent it straight at her. A report came in, an unexpected development. The group split into two and moved toward the main road. The ground cracked under the monster's weight as it advanced. Shiki and Yuel held their ground. It charged. Shiki saw it coming and reacted. Shiki ran straight at the monster. Yuel screamed his name. Lelouka watched from behind, frozen. Shiki came to inside a cave. He had no idea where he was or what had happened. Their clothes were set aside nearby. He could hear water somewhere close. Then Yuel's voice reached him. Yuel was right beside him, bruised and relieved all at once. She told him he was finally awake. Shiki took a moment to register her face. He said her name. Yuel was covered in bruises. She explained what happened. After they brought down the crank-height turtle, the cliff gave way and they fell into the river. Shiki had been out cold. Shiki cast X heal on her and asked what she'd done while he was unconscious. It came back to him. When the cliff collapsed, he'd fallen, and Yuel had jumped in after him. She apologized for taking his clothes off without asking, but she'd been worried he'd get sick. She'd made a fire using a magic tool she found. Their clothes would dry soon. Shiki asked where she'd gotten a magic tool. She wasn't supposed to have one. He noticed things scattered around the cave. Drop items. And the kobold drops nearby. Yuel said she knew this forest had a lot of kobolds. Shiki put it together. She'd been fending them off the whole time he was out, using nothing but what she'd picked up. Yuel said not to worry about her. She'd do anything to keep her master safe. She'd said something like that the first time they met too. Shiki put his hand on her head and thanked her. She'd done well. He knew he couldn't scold her for it. But he also knew that X-Heel couldn't bring someone back once they were gone. He didn't want to be in a world where she wasn't in it. Among the drops was something that looked like a gun. Yuel asked what it was. Shiki recognized it right away. Yuel's reaction told him guns didn't exist in this world. He said they might as well bring the drops back. He told Yuel he also knew how to use it. Yuel looked impressed. He thought to himself that he'd never actually touched one, but his appraisal skill filled in the rest. He kept that part to himself. His appraisal skill told him it was a slime jelly jar, mainly used for cooking, but also able to put out fires. He said it looked like a fire extinguisher. The timing was good. He aimed it at the campfire and fired. The liquid sprayed out and smothered the flames. Yuel asked what the liquid was. Shiki explained, slime jelly, the kind that traps things on contact. That's why it worked as a fire suppressant. He added out loud that it was definitely not an adult toy. He hoped. Yuel said he was amazing. Shiki thought to himself that you needed at least his level of knowledge just to figure these things out, but let her believe it. Their clothes were dry. They headed out. Shiki figured that following the river through the forest would lead them back to the road. Before they fell in, the knights had signaled an unexpected situation. Regrouping with them quickly made sense. Yuel agreed, and said she'd follow whatever path he chose. But she didn't look good. Shiki noticed. After everything she'd done while he was unconscious, it made sense that she was running low. Shiki asked if she was tired and offered to carry her. Yuel refused and said she couldn't be a burden. She pointed out that it would be getting dark soon and they needed to move fast. Then she mentioned, as a dark elf, she could see in the dark. Shiki stared at her. Night vision. He said out loud that she was remarkably high-spec. Shiki kept his eyes on the path ahead. Based on the map he'd looked at before heading out, following this river through the forest should bring them to the road. But something else was bothering him. If the subjugation force came looking for them, they might cross paths along the way. And Yuel was being too careful, more cautious than he'd ever seen her, even in the labyrinth. Shiki thought she wouldn't hold up much longer at this pace. He'd never seen her act this tense before. Then it started to rain. He told her to ease up a bit. They still had the protective bracelets, and as long as nothing killed them in one hit, he could heal whatever came. They'd be okay. Yuel said yes. Yuel flinched at a sound. Shiki told her it was just leaves shaking in the rain. She nodded, still on edge. Shiki watched her and thought she probably needed this level of wariness to survive in a forest at night. This was his first time too, so he wasn't really in a position to say otherwise. He asked quietly if she'd been to this forest before. He thought he might have hit something he shouldn't have. He was about to tell her to forget it. Yuel knocked a bat-type monster out of the air mid-swing and said quietly that she was an abandoned child. She'd grown up in an orphanage in a small town called Kirsch, not far from here. When she lived there, she'd come to this forest sometimes to hunt and earn money. The orphanage shut down around the same time she was sold as a slave. After that, she was shipped off and ended up in Melhood. Shiki listened. Something had badly hurt her. He could see it in her face. Yuel said that right now, just being with her master made her happy. Then she lost her footing and slumped. Shiki caught her before she hit the ground. He called her name. She was shaking. He realized she wasn't just tired. She was scared. Shiki thought back. When he first bought Yuel, she'd already been badly wounded. Slave traders didn't damage their own merchandise, so she must have been hurt before she was sold. He looked at her face as she held herself together. She said she had a secret she'd never told him. Something kept pulling it back down every time she was about to say the name. The road to Melhood ran through this forest. A monster might have attacked her right here. Yuel said the presence in the forest wasn't a kobold. It wasn't a crank-height turtle either. She said what lived in this forest was. Shiki pulled her close and held her against him as something struck from the dark. The attack hit. Shiki got knocked back. Yuel stepped forward and raised her hand. A sphere of light gathered in her palm. Shiki looked up. Something was already cracking on the ground. Yuel's bracelet, it had shattered. Something massive moved through the trees. It wasn't a kobold. It wasn't a crank-height turtle. Shiki stood his ground. The creature approached from the dark. Yuel had dropped to her knees, battered and barely holding on. The monster closed in. Yuel gritted through the pain and looked up. It lunged. Its claws came down toward her. She managed one word, her master's name, before the strike landed. Shiki got between them. He took the hit across his arm and shoved back hard. The impact sent the monster skidding. Shiki kept moving, driving into it. He hit it again. The monster absorbed it and barely moved. It turned and swung. Shiki took the blow and stumbled. He tried again. Nothing. He stared at it, jaw tight. No effect. He wasn't going to win this fight. Running was the only option. He cast X-Heal on himself and grabbed Yuel. He told her they were leaving. Yuel asked him to put her down. She said she'd hold it off. Shiki kept moving. He could feel her shaking in his arms. He asked if the wound on her body was from this thing. Yuel's bracelet was already gone. One more hit, and she wouldn't survive it. The monster was gaining on them. At this pace, it would catch up. The footsteps got louder. Shiki heard them clearly now. Someone had to stop it. He told Yuel she might hate him for this, but there was no other way. He apologized. Please forgive me. Shiki knelt down in front of Yuel and told her it was an order. She was to leave him and run back to town. He told her he'd buy her time. He'd use the slave crest, the mark that let a master force a command on a slave, to make sure she followed through. Yuel stared at him, confused and alarmed. The slave crest on Yuel's chest activated. Her body moved before she could stop it. She called out his name as the monster turned its full attention toward Shiki. Yuel was thrown back, pushed away by the compelled order, screaming for him. Shiki watched her go and steadied himself. This was where he had to hold the line, as her master. The monster charged out of the dark. Shiki's appraisal filled in what it was, an arms ogre, mutated. Hard skin, razor claws, feared by humans and monsters alike for how aggressive it was. That's why no other monsters had shown up. This thing had been keeping them away. Shiki needed a plan. He checked what he had. The slime jelly jar was dried out, useless for damage. But if he just needed to stop it moving for a moment, the gun-shaped tool might work. He fired. The jelly sprayed out and wrapped around the monster's legs. The monster slipped and went down, legs caught in the slippery mess. Shiki moved in. He told himself he'd have preferred to use this on someone else entirely, but he was out of shots anyway. He aimed for the joints where the skin was thinner. It connected. The rain was already washing the jelly away, so he had to move fast. He'd put on a brave front for Yuel, but the truth was he was counting on the knights to finish this. Getting Yuel out was the goal. Playing hero alone wasn't it. Getting both of them out alive was all that mattered. He'd hand this thing off to the knights. He'd even let people see what he could do if it came to it. He thought about getting back to the clinic. He thought about asking Elise to bake cookies. He thought about Yuel being there. He raised his bracelet. The bracelet activated and took the hit. It shattered. Shiki's arm was still in one piece. The claw had punched straight through to his chest. Without the bracelet, it would have been fatal. He cast X-Heal and kept moving. He had to get out of range. The mutation. Its claws could be launched like projectiles. One had gone through him. He cast X-Heal the moment it happened. He told himself there was no time to feel the pain. Just move. He cast X-Heal again and ran. The monster came after him. He had to survive. That was it. Yuel appeared. She hadn't gone. The monster turned toward her. She shoved Shiki out of the way and took the hit. He called her name, eyes wide. Yuel had scraped off the skin where the slave crest was. That's how she'd broken the compelled order. She was back on her feet. Shiki cast X-Heal on her. He apologized for giving her an order like that after everything he'd said about her living freely. He said it was his mistake. Yuel laughed a little and said it worked out in the end. Shiki swung his mace and drove it into the monster with everything he had. The impact landed. The creature staggered. Yuel came running back. Shiki called out to her. She apologized for disobeying him. She said she couldn't just leave. She was there to protect her master. Shiki said she'd saved him again. She said that wasn't true. He was the one who kept saving her. The arms ogre was down. The rain stopped. Yuel stopped shaking. Yuel insisted her master wasn't pathetic at all. She said she was the one who kept getting saved. The rain cleared. The arms ogre lay still on the ground. Yuel had stopped trembling. Kobolds came out of the trees, drawn by the smell of blood. Both Shiki and Yuel were already worn out. Shiki put himself in front of Yuel. He had to at least get her away. Lelouka cut in just in time, taking down the lead kobold before it reached them. She was breathing hard, but steady. She said she made it. Shiki stared. It was Lelouka. Friend fired a fireball and cleared the rest. She handed it off to the knights who came in behind her. Shiki sat down hard on the ground. They were safe. He didn't know how, but they were safe. Lelouka poked at Shiki to make sure he was real. He said he was still alive. She pointed to the arms ogre and said Shiki had taken it down with a mace, just the two of them. Friend looked at the body and quietly thanked him for saving her. Shiki said the dried slime jelly had done most of the work. Fran told Shiki not to get the wrong idea. She just couldn't have lived with herself if he'd died because of her. That's all. The knights said they'd handle the ogre's body and that there'd be a reward for it. Yuel leaned on Shiki and said now that the tension had faded, she was exhausted. Shiki said he was impressed Lelouka had found them. She asked if he hadn't known about the earring, the one she gave him. The right piece could track whoever wore the left piece. Shiki said he had absolutely no idea it could do that. Lelouka asked if she could keep it. Shiki said sure. She pointed out that meant she could find him whenever she wanted without him knowing. He told her to give it back. Lelouka laughed it off and tried to change the subject. Shiki saw through it. She'd probably planned to use it to run into him at the bar or get free healing in the labyrinth. He told her to hand it over. She apologized. The town came into view ahead. He let it go. The thing had saved his life, so he couldn't really stay mad. They were almost home. He noticed the road ahead and asked what had happened just before he fell off the cliff, specifically why the knights had rushed back to town. Then he spotted the answer. 2 crank-height turtle corpses were on the ground. The group stared. 2 of them. Someone muttered that this was bad. The turtles had been nesting outside the labyrinth, breeding and multiplying. The knights had gone back to prepare for an attack. The real danger wasn't the turtles themselves, it was the poison gas they released. Rain made it spread even further. The town was already in a panic. A girl pointed out that the knights had already beaten the turtles, so why the gas? Someone else realized the dead ones were still releasing it. Outside, people pushed and shoved trying to get into a building. Knights tried to keep order. Shiki watched the chaos and decided they needed to help. Shiki told Elise to stay and handle things here while he headed back. Elise reminded him that the clinic would be packed too. He ran off. Back at the clinic, Elise was already working. When Shiki arrived, she looked up, relieved he was back. She cast Dispoison without hesitation, getting straight to work. Shiki slipped in through the back door. His appearance didn't exactly scream healer, so no one had stopped him to ask for help. He looked rough. Elise noticed immediately and asked what happened to him. He just said it was a lot. He showed her his bracelet. It had broken but had taken the hit for him. Yuel had also worn herself out and was sleeping. Then, quietly, Yuel opened her eyes. Shiki crouched down and asked if she was okay. Shiki pulled back his collar to show the bruising across his shoulder. Yuel stared at it. The bracelet had broken, protecting him. She recognized the feeling, the same one from the time she had failed to keep him safe. That matching bracelet they had picked out together was gone now. To Yuel, it was the same as losing something she couldn't get back. Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed her face down and fought hard to keep it together. Shiki watched her struggle. She had done so much, saved him after the cliff, stood her ground against the ogre. She couldn't hold it. The tears were right there. Shiki thought about the people outside still suffering, about everything Yuel had already done for him. He couldn't just leave it like this. Shiki thought hard about what he could give her to replace it. Then it hit him. He grabbed Elise and told her they were heading outside for a bit. Elise looked confused but followed. Yuel watched them go, puzzled. Elise gave in and told him not to push himself too hard. The two of them slipped out as the sky was still dark. They found a spot outside as sunrise approached. Shiki stopped and told Yuel to listen. He laid it out plainly. The town was in bad shape. Poison gas had already spread by the time they got back. There were 2 crank-height turtles, and the healers couldn't keep up. People needed help. Yuel had seen the crowd outside. She had already connected the pieces. If nothing changed, people were going to get hurt badly. Shiki went quiet for a moment. then told her what he was planning to do. He told Yuel the people probably wouldn't die. The gas was meant to slow enemies down, not kill them, and at worst it caused nausea. The knights could manage the panic. He admitted that part was a lie, told just to ease her worry. He hadn't lied to hurt her. He then told her he was going to save the town. But what he was about to do needed to stay between them. There were people who would try to use his abilities if word got out. Yuel lit up at the idea of a secret just between the two of them. Shiki coughed and got back on track. He thought Elise probably had a rough idea of what he was planning too. He told Yuel that the reason he could act right now was because she had protected him. The bracelet was gone, but it had done its job. That was proof enough. Yuel smiled and nodded. Shiki raised his hand and cast area dispoison over the town. That was the end of his act. He had flipped it. Instead of Yuel grieving over a lost bracelet, she could be proud of what it had done. The moment the person she protected turned around and saved the town was something worth holding on to. Light spread across the rooftops. People in the streets looked up, confused, then relieved. Someone recognized it as healing magic. Someone else couldn't believe the range. Elise watched quietly and said the people would calm down now. The town had been saved. The scene shifted to the clinic exterior, quiet now in the early morning. Shiki and Yuel came back to find Elise waiting at the door. She greeted them home and noted, with a small smile, that it looked like he had done something impressive. Shiki said he'd done what he could. Elise told him to get inside and rest. He agreed, and then his legs gave out. He had been running on empty, and seeing Elise's face was apparently the last push he needed before his body quit on him. Elise caught him before he hit the ground. Yuel panicked. Shiki couldn't move at all. He lay there, completely spent. He clarified, nothing weird about it. He was just completely wiped out, not able to move a single step. He figured Elise was going to be annoyed at him, but instead, she said nothing and quietly pulled him close, steadying him without a word. Yuel jogged over to help as they got him inside. The long fight was over. The crank-height turtle threatening the town was gone. The ogre that Yuel had feared was gone too. They received a solid reward for it all. Elise's clinic picked up more attention after the poison gas incident. When Shiki finally woke up from his long sleep, Elise had just finished baking cookies, and Yuel was already eating them with both cheeks full, declaring they were delicious. That was what he had expected to happen, but instead, things went sideways immediately. A large, cheerful man appeared and asked Shiki if he had set a wedding date yet, then turned to him and asked if he was the one his daughter had made a promise with. The girls on either side looked tense. Shiki stared blankly and asked what was going on. Yuel looked at Shiki with wide, damp eyes and asked if he was really getting married. Another girl demanded to know if it was true. Elise looked at him, quiet but waiting, and asked what this was supposed to mean. Shiki had absolutely no idea how things had gotten to this point. He had the same question. He wanted an explanation just as badly as everyone else, and he screamed into the sky for someone to please tell him what was going on. Shiki woke up slowly, not sure if it was morning yet. He looked over and found Elise still there beside him in bed. His first thought was panic. He had no memory of anything after passing out from exhaustion. His hand was stuck, and he couldn't pull it free. He doubted Elise would have done anything, and figured she had probably just stayed by his side through the night. He got himself together and greeted her good morning. Elise pointed out it was actually evening. Shiki scrambled for something to say and apologized. She wasn't angry. If anything, there was a faint blush on her face, which made him wonder. She told him to get cleaned up and get dressed. He smirked to himself, figuring there might be something to investigate later. Elise cleared things up. Nothing had happened. He had clung to her even after passing out, so she had no choice but to stay. She had Yuel take care of his ruined clothes since he couldn't sleep in them. Shiki accepted that and dropped the expression. Then he asked where Yuel was. Elise just pointed. She was right behind him. Yuel greeted him quietly, glad he was feeling better. Shiki noticed she seemed a little off, quieter than usual, and was relieved she hadn't seen the awkward situation with Elise. Then Elise came in holding a notice that had arrived at the clinic, an invitation to a banquet at the Lord's manor. The letter was from the Lord, celebrating the victory of the subjugation force and inviting the healer who had helped. The town had settled down after the panic over the poison mist. The group walked together down the street. Elise wondered aloud if it was really okay for her to come along, since she hadn't taken part in the hunt. Shiki pointed out the invitation said to bring loved ones, so she was fine. He planned to pass her off as family for the event. As they walked, they passed a wedding procession making its way through the streets with townspeople cheering. Yuel asked what it was. Shiki guessed it was a wedding and explained it was a local custom for newlyweds to parade through town to receive blessings. Elise seemed surprised neither of them had seen it before. Yuel went quiet and grabbed onto Shiki's sleeve, the word marriage sitting somewhere in the back of her mind. Yuel asked Shiki if he ever planned to get married. He started to answer and nearly said harem out loud, caught himself just in time. He said he just wanted a happy, peaceful life. Elise stared at him. He thought hard about keeping his face neutral and not giving anything away. Shiki confirmed he wasn't engaged to anyone and told Yuel directly that he wouldn't just go off and get married without telling her. Shortly after, they arrived at the Lord's manor, where a large, cheerful man burst into laughter saying he couldn't believe his daughter had actually brought a man home, given how much she hated men. Shiki stood there completely lost, wondering when and how any of this had happened. Yuel grabbed Shiki and started tearing up, saying she wanted to stay by his side even if he got married. The Lord praised Shiki as an outstanding healer who had saved his daughter, calling him the perfect match for Fran. Shiki tried to pump the brakes. One of the other girls insisted Fran think this through and pointed out that Shiki was absolutely not her type. Fran muttered that she had nothing to offer and nothing to give. Shiki made it clear he had never agreed to marry anyone and refused to let this happen. He knew marrying Fran would mean giving up life with Elise, and that was not acceptable. The room went silent. Fran's father demanded she explain herself. Someone else pointed out there was no actual basis for any engagement. Fran's father had been told they were engaged, but that wasn't true. Fran stood there saying nothing, clearly at the center of a mess she had started. Shiki asked everyone to calm down and hear him out. According to Fran, the Lord had simply misread the situation between the two of them. Fran had used that misunderstanding to get her father's permission to leave home and return to town. The Lord, hearing the full story, wiped his tears and welcomed Fran back. He was grateful Shiki had risked his life to protect her. The situation ended without anyone getting hurt, though Fran's expression made it clear things could have gone very differently. Shiki shook his head at how chaotic the whole thing had been. Yuel and the other girl laughed it off. Neither of them had actually believed for a second that Fran and Shiki were a real couple. Fran made it loudly known she had zero interest in marrying him and didn't even like his face. Yuel, completely sincere, said she liked her master's face a lot. Shiki found out that a girl named Sarah had been giving Fran advice, and that advice had somehow escalated the whole thing to a fake engagement. Shiki told Fran flatly that if she tried to hide a lie, it would always come out. Fran's father and Sarah were still dealing with the fallout in the background. Elise told Shiki directly that he would know the feeling, meaning lies tend to catch up with you. He agreed, though he wasn't sure about the others involved. Yuel asked quietly if this meant things would stay the same between them. Shiki told her his healing powers couldn't fix broken relationships between other people, but he thought they'd figure it out. Days passed. The commotion at the manor faded into gossip, and the town moved on. The annual Melhearts festival was coming up, and Yuel was buzzing with excitement. They had already received their reward for helping with the subjugation. Shiki had told Yuel she didn't need to keep her part-time job, but she insisted on earning her own way. She had saved up and wanted to check out all the stalls. Shiki heard the festival would be bigger than usual this year, with visitors from out of town. Elise had probably figured out by now that Shiki was behind the mysterious healing that night. It was supposed to be a secret between him and Yuel, but Elise was sharp. Shiki headed out to walk Yuel to her shift. Elise asked him to deliver a letter to her younger sister Arya, who was studying at the Night Academy in the royal capital. She hoped Arya might visit for the festival. Shiki asked what she was like. He kept his actual thoughts about the sister situation to himself. Elise, reading his face without effort, told him not to try anything with her sister. The festival grounds were already busy with stalls and people everywhere. Word was still spreading about the mysterious healer who had saved the town. Shiki strolled back toward the clinic after dropping Yuel off, quietly enjoying hearing people talk about what he had done. He spotted his friends Geyser and 8 hanging around and called out to them. Geyser and 8 were at the festival trying to meet girls. 8 seemed reluctant about the whole plan. Geyser was doing most of the pushing. Then Geyser made a very loud declaration about the appeal of meeting women, which echoed across the street. 8 wavered. Shiki watched the whole thing and considered pretending he didn't know them. Geyser argued that 8 had never once gotten close to a girl in his life and challenged him on it. 8 cracked. Geyser grabbed 8 and declared it a day of courage, rallying him up. 8 got swept along. Geyser spotted a girl nearby, shouted at her to get her attention, and charged straight in. The approach was as loud and clumsy as expected. He slammed his hand against the wall beside her, and she immediately slammed her hand right back. Shiki watched from a distance, already knowing how it was going to end. Geyser got caught immediately. The girl called for the knights, and they showed up fast. 8 and Shiki debated whether to pretend they didn't know him and walk away. Geyser screamed for them to save him. A knight recognized Shiki as the healer who had helped with the Crankite turtle subjugation and asked if this man was with him. Shiki and 8 gave in, apologized on Geyser's behalf, and explained he was socially awkward and had said something he shouldn't have. There was no getting out of it. Geyser, relieved to be free, started picking apart what had gone wrong with his approach. Shiki told him the problem probably wasn't the technique. Geyser broke down. Shiki confirmed he knew those knights from working with them briefly before. Then someone tapped his shoulder from behind. A girl called out to Shiki, telling him he was kind of cool. She had overheard his conversation with the knights and figured out his name and that he was a healer. She asked if he wanted to hang out for a bit. Shiki said yes without hesitating. Geyser and 8 watched him walk off, completely floored. The two of them walked through the festival stalls. The girl mentioned she used to live somewhere in this town and had been wanting to come back. Shiki got curious about what she meant by a nice place. Then she asked if he always went around trying to pick up girls like that. Shiki explained he had only gone along because his friends pushed him into it, and that he had mostly just watched. She laughed it off and said he was lucky then. She grabbed his arm and pulled him along, telling him to stop worrying about it. He noticed the grip was stronger than expected. She said she was sure he already knew the place she had in mind. The path started to feel familiar. Shiki noted she reminded him of someone. Same build, same look. He told himself he was probably just imagining it. She kept leading him forward and told him he would see when they got there. Shiki asked if she was currently living at the royal capital. She confirmed it. He pushed further. Did she have an older sister who lived in this town? She lit up and said yes, right in this neighborhood, and that her sister ran a clinic and worked hard at it. Shiki braced himself. He asked her name. She grinned and said Aria. The secret was out. Shiki's next thought was that she was supposed to be at the Night Academy in the royal capital, so why was she here? And then he looked up and realized they were already standing in front of Elise's clinic. Aria pushed open the door, cheerfully announcing she was back, still dragging Shiki along. He demanded she let go of his arm. She refused, laughing. Shiki went cold. If Elise found out he had been picked up during a street approach, that was it for him. Aria teased him for trying to meet girls when he already had her big sister around. The door opened. Elise stared at both of them, confused, and asked why they were together. Aria hugged her happily, glad to be back, and cheerfully told Elise she had caught Shiki trying to pick up girls in town. Shiki went pale. Elise's expression shifted. The chapter ended there, with Shiki very much out of places to hide. The three of them sat around the table in awkward silence. Shiki was trying to figure out how to get out of this. Aria had been the one to approach him first, but given his track record, he doubted Elise would see it that way. He started to think through his options while Aria casually pointed out that Elise was the one who had written things that caused the misunderstanding in the first place. Aria told Elise about catching Shiki in her little test and asked what they should do with him. Shiki noted to himself that Aria assuming he and Elise had that kind of relationship wasn't exactly unwelcome. Elise flatly shut down the framing. She pointed out that Aria had only dragged him back because she found the whole thing funny. Aria flinched. Elise confirmed they were not like that. Shiki went quiet. Aria pushed back. Elise had written enough in her letters to make Aria think they were actually a couple, and they were living under the same roof. Elise went red and started fumbling for words. Aria pointed out that living together was something couples did. Shiki glanced sideways at Elise. Elise was blushing. Shiki decided to lean into it and confirmed they also shared the same room every night. Elise snapped at him to stop. Aria lit up. Elise insisted nothing was going on and that she only let him stay to protect UL. The chaos settled. Aria laughed and admitted she had been worrying about Elise being lonely this whole time and that it seemed like she didn't need to anymore. Arya then mentioned she was only in town temporarily, stationed there for the festival period. Arya told them not to mind her and to keep doing what they had been doing. She warned Shiki not to fall for any more traps. Elise said she already told them there was nothing going on. Shiki noted to himself that Arya clearly wanted him and Elise to get together. Arya said she had to get back to her station and promised to visit again. On her way out, she leaned over and asked Shiki if he could walk her back, saying she didn't want to get lost. Elise reluctantly agreed. Outside, Arya laughed about how fun that had been. Shiki told her she had nearly ruined the careful work he had put into staying on Elise's good side. Arya admitted the getting lost excuse was just a reason to pull him out. They rounded a corner and spotted a woman in the street, with a crowd gathering around her. Someone nearby said she was a Medine priestess. The woman was casting wide area, healing magic freely over the crowd. Arya explained she did the same at the royal capital, relying on donations afterward. People called her the saint. Shiki recognized the light pattern. It was an X-heal spell. He concluded she had to be a high-level priestess. He was still watching closely when Arya tugged his arm and said she needed to ask him something. Arya explained she had been worried for a while that Elise was hiding things in her letters to keep up appearances. She had come partly to check on her. She confirmed that Elise hadn't written anything about almost losing the clinic to debt. Shiki noted that Elise always kept things to herself. Arya was relieved to see Elise was genuinely okay. Then she got serious, grabbed his hand, and told him Elise cared about him more than she let on. She just wasn't upfront about it. Arya asked him to take good care of her. Arya said she really wanted her sister to be happy. Shiki thought about what she had said. Based on how Arya had prejudged him, Elise had clearly written about his habit of getting flustered around women, but she had also spoken well of him. He thought about asking Elise about her letters carefully. He got back to the clinic and found Elise waiting. She told him she was moving out. Shiki hadn't said a word yet, and she was already announcing she was leaving. He wondered if Arya's teasing had pushed her to make a decision. Elise explained she had been thinking about it since the time he went out hunting with the knights. Being alone at the clinic that whole time made her ask herself why she hadn't been part of it, and whether she was good enough as a healer. Elise explained that having Shiki around had raised her own standard for what a proper healer looked like, and that felt like a problem she needed to deal with. She planned to go to the Church of Medine in the royal capital to retrain from scratch. She had already decided it was the right move. Shiki's immediate reaction was that he couldn't let that happen. 5 years away, with a pilgrimage on top of that, meant almost no chance of seeing her. He pushed the thought aside and told her he had another way to help her improve without her needing to leave. Elise looked up. Yahello came back, just as Shiki offered to teach Elise what he knew about healing. Elise wanted to fight too. She was tired of waiting alone while others were out doing things. Shiki thought about what that meant, remembering that Elise had been alone when her parents died. Arya lived far away. He and Yahello were always out taking risks. He asked how long she planned to stay at the capital. She said about 5 years, including pilgrimage training. 5 years was out of the question. Shiki pushed back immediately. If he left her alone for that long, someone else would step in and she'd come back a completely different situation. He told her he could help her grow in far less time. Elise looked at him, uncertain. Shiki offered to teach her the principles behind his healing ability. He wasn't especially religious, and he couldn't pass on his actual power, but knowledge was something he could share. He figured that if his being brought to this world had something to do with his healing, then teaching the underlying concepts might actually work. Yahello walked in right as he started, thrilled to be learning something. Elise asked what method he had in mind. Shiki said he was going to start with a health education lecture. Healing in this world relied on faith, magical power, and healing knowledge. Shiki wasn't particularly religious, but knowledge was his to give. The basics he knew from growing up were probably far ahead of anything this world had. He used the building as a stand-in for the human body and started explaining how different parts worked, pretending the windows and walls were organs. Yahello asked what a thrombocyte was. Elise said she had no idea what he was trying to show them. Shiki started to wonder if he needed to mention he was from another world to make this more convincing, then decided that would only confuse them more. Shiki tried acting out how blood cells behave around a wound, pressing himself against the window to demonstrate. Elise politely said she wasn't good at guessing games. Yahello had already gone glassy-eyed. Shiki started to doubt his approach. Elise shook Yahello awake. Yahello yawned. Elise told Shiki he didn't seem to have a clear grasp of what he was trying to explain himself. Shiki admitted she had a point. Then Yuel fell fully asleep. Shiki was stunned. Yuel woke up just enough to tell him it wasn't boring. His voice and movements were just very soothing. The lecture had put her right to sleep. The knowledge strategy wasn't working. That night, Shiki told Elise to hold off on going to the capital and promised he would find another way. The next day at the festival, he went looking for magical accessories. The stall vendor pointed out that everything in the stalls were replicas, cheaper versions of what you'd find in the labyrinth, with no actual stat boost. Shiki used his appraisal and confirmed it. With the reward money he now had, his new plan was to find a real magical accessory that could boost Elise's power directly. Someone jumped out and startled him. It was Lelouka. She asked what he was looking for. He told her, something that actually boosted magic power. She grinned and said she knew a place. Shiki reminded himself that Arya had only just asked him to take good care of Elise, and now he was already running into Lelouka alone. He figured it would be bad if someone saw them together like this. Lelouka offered to help him shop and pointed him toward a big news store nearby. Shiki told himself to stay cool and think positive. He knew the risk with Lelouka. She had a way of getting people to buy things they hadn't planned to. But he needed the accessory, and she knew where to look. He followed her, telling himself he could handle it. Lelouka pointed out a food stall and suggested Shiki buy something. He agreed, reminding himself the real reason he was with her was because she knew more about magical accessories than he did, and her help would speed things up. The crowd ahead was thick. They spotted the priestess from the day before performing healing again, drawing a large audience. They'd need to find another way through. Lelouka explained the festival included a battle tournament and a beauty contest, which was why the streets were so packed. Shiki's attention caught on the beauty contest. Lelouka said contestants wore bold costumes and predicted he would go watch. Shiki quietly thought about pushing Elise to enter. Then he reconsidered. If she won and got famous, it would bring the wrong kind of attention. He dropped the idea. Then Elise showed up in a contest outfit, demanding to know why he had made her wear it. Shiki went blank. Lelouka said she might enter the contest too. The prize money was decent. She figured she and Elise would make a good rivalry. Shiki stared. Before anyone could process that, Arya appeared from the crowd and called out to Shiki, loudly demanding to know who the girl with him was. Arya accused Shiki of cheating on her sister. Shiki insisted Lelouka was just helping him shop. He needed a magical accessory for Elise. Lelouka froze when Arya said the gift was for Elise. A senior knight appeared and smacked Arya on the head for slacking off her security patrol, then dragged her away. Arya shouted back at Shiki to stay put. Arya was hauled off, demanding answers later. Lelouka, flustered from being called a mistress, apologized and told Shiki she couldn't keep going. She ran off. Shiki called after her. She told him to finish shopping without her. He noted to himself that she had clearly reacted to being called a mistress, which meant she cared. He chased after her. Shiki caught up and tried to explain. The gift was for Elise, nothing more, just a way to keep her from leaving for the capital. Lelouka pointed out that all the accessories with magic power boosts happened to be rings. Shiki went quiet. She told him he might as well be buying a wedding ring at that point. He tried to argue back, but he was out of breath. She told him to catch up first. Something about the whole situation left him with an odd feeling he couldn't quite name. Shiki chased Lelouka through the alleys. She was faster than expected. He eventually lost her and stopped, out of breath. He ended up in a back area with nothing but abandoned buildings around him. He told himself he couldn't afford to get lost here. A voice called out from a gap in the wall ahead. Lelouka had squeezed through and gotten stuck. She asked him to help pull her free. Shiki stood there catching his breath, staring at the situation. Lelouka kicked her feet and told him to say something. Shiki thought to himself, this was his chance. Lelouka was stuck and yelling for help. She had tried to cut through the building to lose Shiki, but now she was wedged in the window opening. Shiki noted he had the upper hand. He told her to hear him out first. Shiki used this as his chance to clear things up. He explained he wasn't engaged to anyone, that Arya had jumped to conclusions, and that he needed to tell her what was going on. Lelouka told him to stop. She didn't want an explanation while stuck like this. She just wanted out. He gave in and grabbed her legs to pull. Pulling didn't work. Lelouka told him to try pushing instead. Shiki pointed out what that would mean and asked if she was sure. She told him to just do it. He pushed. She shot through from the other side with a yelp. Lelouka changed her mind at the last second, then changed it again. Shiki pushed anyway, and she popped through. He took a kick to the face in the process. He noted he was more aware of the sensation in his hands than the hit. Shiki announced he was going to grab the pockets and try pulling again. Lelouka told him not to touch anywhere else. He counted down and pulled as hard as he could. It didn't work. Lelouka panicked when her shorts started sliding off. She told Shiki to stop and demanded he fix her shorts without touching her. He told her to stop moving and said he would try pulling once more. She begged him not to leave. He told her not to kick him again. The short situation got worse. Shiki felt genuinely sorry for her at that point. Shiki pulled out a container of slime jelly from his pack as a last resort. He warned Lelouka it would be cold and applied it around where she was stuck against the wall, working it in to reduce the friction. Lelouka had no idea what was happening but panicked at the cold. Shiki told Lelouka to trust him and get ready. He applied the slime jelly thoroughly at the stuck point, gripped her legs, and pulled steadily. She popped free all at once and slid out onto the ground. They both sat on the ground in silence for a moment. Shiki told her she was out. Lelouka stared, still in disbelief, and thanked him quietly. Evening had settled in around them. Lelouka complained about the slime and asked what that stuff even was. Shiki explained it was useful for escaping monsters. He just drops it on the ground and they slip. He kept the other use to himself. She said it did sound useful. He told her she should probably go get cleaned up, then remembered the only public baths in town were at certain inns. Shiki spotted the look on her face. He wrapped his spare cloak around her so she could walk through town without drawing attention and told her she could return it next time she saw him. Lelouka realized what bath meant and what kind of inns those were. Shiki caught her expression, then noticed her reaction to him wrapping the cloak around her. He told her to watch this. He wrapped it around her properly so she could at least walk around without the mess being visible. She looked startled but let him. He told her to return it next time. Shiki told her to be careful with Arya still around. Lelouka thanked him quietly, gripping the cloak. He hoped she hadn't taken what he said the wrong way. The two of them stood in silence for a moment before heading back. Shiki brought up what Lelouka had said earlier, about him and Elise not being married. He confirmed it was true. Lelouka went quiet and said she understood. Shiki found himself wondering why she kept showing interest in him. He didn't think it was about money or his reaction to her teasing. He couldn't figure it out, and the quiet between them gave him the opening to think about it. Lelouka stumbled and Shiki caught her. She apologized and said she must have tripped on something. He told her to watch her step. Then they both stopped. Something large was in the alley ahead. Shiki spotted a tail disappearing around the corner. A monster, in town, in a back alley. Shiki couldn't figure out why it was there. He told Lelouka they needed to get out and report it to the knights. Lelouka wanted to leave immediately. Then she peeked around the corner anyway. Lelouka immediately called it cute. It was a dragon. She said she had recognized it from the tail. Shiki fell back. She explained that dragons were actually docile and wouldn't attack unless provoked. Shiki wasn't convinced. The dragon nuzzled Lelouka. Shiki used his appraisal ability and spotted a necklace around its neck, a servant necklace that put monsters under submission. That meant the dragon had an owner somewhere. He mentioned it seemed to like her. Then a figure appeared from the shadows. A hooded man stepped out and told Lelouka she shouldn't be petting other people's dragons. Shiki kept calm and explained they had gotten lost. The man said the dragon was going to make a surprise appearance at the festival's battle tournament, so he was keeping it hidden until then. He asked them to keep it between themselves. Shiki agreed, though he kept his suspicions about the man to himself. He planned to keep it secret from Yahello and Elise too. The man pointed them toward the main street and dismissed them. As Shiki and Lelouka walked away, Lelouka kept going on about how cute the dragon was. Shiki flatly said he hadn't found it cute at all, though his expression said otherwise. Shiki bumped into a large, muscular man, a Medine priest, by the look of him. The man told him to watch where he was going. The girl beside Shiki whispered that he should work out to look like that. Shiki told her to drop it. Being good at running away was all he needed. He had no intention of fighting anyone, ever. She pushed back a little, saying he should at least toughen up enough not to freeze when he saw a cute dragon. Shiki went quiet. She'd seen that. They reached the parting point. The girl apologized for how the day had gone and promised to help him shop next time. Shiki said that was fine. She waved it off, smiled, and said she'd see him around. She gripped her cloak as she said goodbye, her knuckles tight despite the easy smile on her face. Shiki stood there after she left, second-guessing himself. He reminded himself he'd done the right thing, then immediately felt the waste of it. He also had a promise to keep to Arya about behaving around Elise, so he pushed the thought aside and kept walking. Further down the street, he ran into Fran and Sarah. Fran lit up when she saw him. Sarah was busy scolding her. Their budget had been cut, and they were banned from the labyrinth. Fran complained she just wanted to eat at the food stalls. Shiki greeted them cautiously. He figured Sarah was fine, but Fran still threw him off. Sarah told him he was right on time and invited him to join them for a meal. They had catching up to do. Fran reacted like the suggestion was outrageous. Sarah reminded her, with a calm smile, that she still owed Shiki for saving her life, and that the reward her father gave him didn't change that. Fran gave in, annoyed but unable to argue. She muttered it was about repaying her debt, not anything else. Sarah told Shiki that now that Fran had come around, he could ask her for anything. Fran stiffened and said there was no way she was giving up something that personal to someone like him. Shiki said he hadn't asked for anything. He also noted, privately, that the thought had briefly crossed his mind, but Fran was Lelouch's friend, and that alone was enough to stop him. Shiki's inner villain fantasy flashed through his head for a second before he shut it down. He told himself Lelouch would never forgive him. He brought it back to something reasonable and suggested Fran could get a magical accessory that boosts magic power to call things even. Fran pointed out that even she couldn't afford one. Sarah added they could ask her father to help with the purchase. Fran's expression made it clear the request was not any easier to deal with. Fran flatly refused the idea of involving her father, knowing it would lead straight to a forced marriage. Shiki said he didn't think it was a bad idea at all, which only made her more frustrated. The accessories really were expensive. Fran thought for a moment, then said she had no choice. She couldn't afford a magical accessory, but she had another idea. She told Shiki to come back to the manor with her. Back at the manor, Fran asked Shiki about his magic. He explained that he couldn't do offensive spells. His control was too poor. When he'd first tried to cast a basic heal, it came out at the level of a high-tier spell instead. The worst that could happen with healing magic was curing more than needed, so at least it wasn't dangerous. Fran decided to test something. She handed him a mana crystal and told him to hold it. The crystal immediately blazed with light, startling them both. Fran confirmed it. Shiki had a mana leak. It was a condition where someone had trouble holding mana in, and his was unusually severe. Shiki panicked internally, worried she'd figured out he had an abnormally high mana level. Sarah pointed out that he could still use healing magic just fine, so Fran put the pieces together and told him she'd been wrong about him. She apologized. Shiki's first concern was that if her father found out, the marriage push would start all over again. Fran bowed and apologized for misjudging him, explaining she'd assumed the worst. She'd interpreted his mana level as a sign of high piety. In this world, that meant someone blessed by a god rather than simply someone with unusual raw mana. Shiki played along and let the misunderstanding stand. Fran gave him the mana crystal and explained it could be used to measure how much he was leaking. With regular practice, he might eventually gain some control over it. She told him that settled their debt. He agreed. The misunderstanding had worked out. Fran's attitude toward him noticeably softened after that. Shiki came home that evening to find Elise and the small spirit girl sitting outside reading together. The spirit asked what had happened to the evil lord after it was sealed away by a great saint. Elise said she didn't know. She explained they were reading the Medine Bible. Even a little religious study was one way to build piety. Elise turned to Shiki as he came through the door and started to say something more important. Elise pointed out that Shiki was glowing. He explained the mana crystal was a mana leak gauger. She noted she had a similar one, then checked the reading. The mana concentration in the room was far higher than anything she'd encountered at the holy training grounds. The crystal couldn't handle it and cracked. Elise let out a small sound of surprise. Elise told Shiki his mana level was abnormally high, not because of piety or knowledge, but raw mana, leaking freely. Because of that, the room had turned into something close to a holy ground. The closer she was to him, the more her own mana level rose. Shiki immediately saw the upside. If he stayed near her for a few years, he might eventually manage a high-level heal. The spirit girl quietly asked what that meant for Elise's training at the royal capital. Shiki laid it out plainly. Since Elise absorbed more mana the closer she was to him, she no longer needed to go anywhere. Elise considered this, then suggested they share a bed from now on. Shiki started to say no, then paused just a beat too long. The spirit girl caught it immediately and pointed it out. Elise held the question, waiting. Her expression was hard to read. Early morning. Shiki got up to use the restroom and found Yuel already awake, yawning and insisting on tagging along. He told her to stay in bed. She twitched, but followed anyway. They hadn't been spending much time together lately because of her part-time job, and she kept trying to make up for it whenever she could. A sound at the front door stopped them both. Yuel grabbed her daggers. Shiki told her to put them down. He'd just remembered there was one other person with access to the clinic. It was Arya. She apologized for the early visit and explained she was there for a home check. She greeted Yuel warmly. Shiki introduced Arya as Elise's younger sister, back in town for the festival. Arya already had a rough idea of Yuel's situation from a letter Elise had sent. She knew Shiki had taken in a young elf girl who'd been badly injured and helped her recover. She asked what had brought things to this point. Shiki figured this early visit wasn't just social. Arya asked what the story was with the day before. He knew she'd still be thinking about it. He explained that a magical accessory hadn't been found, but the issue had been handled another way. She could get the full details from Elise. Arya was relieved and said he should have told her sooner. Shiki noted the mana leak explanation would be hard to believe without hearing it directly from Elise. Then Arya told him the real reason she'd shown up so early was to test him. Shiki hadn't been able to get a magical accessory, but the problem had still been dealt with. Arya was glad, though she said she still couldn't fully relax as long as her sister had an unresolved issue. She'd ask Elise about the details later. Shiki thought about explaining how his mana leak had accidentally become a solution for Elise, but figured Arya wouldn't buy it without hearing it straight from her sister. Then Arya brought up the real point. She was there early because she wanted to test his mettle. Arya picked up a wooden sword and laid out the terms. If Shiki wanted to be around her sister, he had to beat her first. Shiki wasn't thrilled. Arya made her reason clear. She needed to know he could at least protect Elise from trouble when they were out together. Yuel immediately said yes on his behalf. Arya swung at Shiki and declared she was going to train someone her sister had her eye on. Yuel froze when she heard that word. Shiki quietly put his hand on her head to distract her while Arya kept talking, pointing out that based on their first meeting, he clearly had too much drive and not enough discipline. Yuel snapped back to attention, confused. Yuel zoned out. Arya told Shiki his energy needed an outlet, either through Elise or through serious exercise. Shiki noted to himself that he'd already been thrown out of the clinic once for less. He had no interest in brutal training, but he also didn't want Yuel thinking he was unwilling to improve. Arya told him the goal was simple: beat an armor ogre. Shiki did not find that simple. Yuel jumped in and said she wanted to train too. She hadn't been able to beat an armor ogre on her own and wanted to get stronger to protect Shiki. Arya was surprised she could fight. Shiki confirmed they'd taken one down together and that Yuel had dagger skills. Arya pointed out that Shiki was weaker than a small child and asked if he had some kind of condition. He mentioned the mana leak, hoping it would get him out of the hard training. Arya shifted her focus to Yuel instead and told Shiki his training would be postponed for now. Arya and Yuel squared off with wooden weapons. Shiki stepped back to watch. He quietly noted that Arya was underestimating Yuel. Yuel wasn't just standing there. She was reading Arya, waiting for the right moment. The instant she found it, she moved. Arya barely kept up. She was shocked by Yuel's speed. Shiki watched and thought about what made Yuel dangerous. It was her speed, and the fact that wanting to protect him pushed her to take on things much bigger than herself. Yuel kept the pressure on. Shiki cheered her on. Arya had more experience, though, and that gap started to show. Still, Yuel held her ground longer than expected. Yuel landed a hit. Then Arya countered and knocked her down. The match ended with Yuel on the ground, both of them catching their breath. Arya said her name quietly. Arya told Yuel she was good, better than expected, but that she was a top student at the Night Academy and Yuel's attacks had become readable. She asked if Yuel had much dueling experience. Yuel admitted she didn't. Arya told her she already had the physical ability, and that with more experience and time she'd surpass her easily. Yuel thanked her. Arya said they should both keep pushing. Shiki watched and thought that Arya won mostly because of experience. Shiki thought about how everyone around him was growing in their own way and wondered what was ahead. Yahello bounced back quickly and declared she was going to protect both Shiki and Elise. Arya told Shiki not to wait too long on his own training. She wanted to be sure he could actually protect her sister. Shiki noted to himself that Yahello was probably too innocent to read into that. Probably. Arya pushed back, pointing out it was a bit much to lean on Yahello. She was strong, but still a kid who couldn't handle duels yet. Yahello pushed back hard, defending Shiki. She pointed out he'd bought back Elise's clinic by healing people, and that he'd tried to protect her from a monster when she was hurt. Then she caught herself. She'd said too much. Arya went still. Shiki told Yahello it wasn't her fault. Arya pulled her sister into another room. Shiki barely got a word in before the door shut. Through it, Arya confronted Elise. She hadn't been told the clinic was sold, and she wanted to know why. Elise's response was too quiet to hear. Yahello felt awful. Arya's voice carried through the door. She told Elise nothing had changed. She still made decisions without telling anyone. The door slammed. Shiki and Yahello stood there, startled. Yahello blamed herself. Shiki rushed after Arya. Arya stood still, something unreadable on her face. Shiki understood what Arya had missed. She hadn't been told the clinic was sold to cover tuition, because Elise knew she would have quit the Night Academy to stop it. Elise had lied on purpose to protect Arya's dream. After their parents died, the tuition had become a real problem, and Elise had handled it alone rather than let Arya give up. Arya said quietly she should have been told sooner. Her voice was flat. The weight of it sat between them. Shiki now understood the full picture. The lie Elise had told Arya was that the church had given them a large sum of condolence money, so there was nothing to worry about. The church did have a system like that for families who lost someone, which was exactly why Arya had believed it without question. But the money never came. Elise's funds ran dry, and she ended up having to give up the clinic. Around the time their parents died, a new archbishop had taken over, and the local church had started doing things differently after that. Because of the change in leadership, Elise had stopped trusting the church in this town, and that was part of why she'd sent Arya to the royal capital. Elise started explaining the situation, but Shiki's mind drifted as she talked. He snapped back when she called him out. He admitted the distraction and summed up what he'd pieced together. Arya got upset because of the lie. Elise agreed, quietly adding that Arya had every right to be. Shiki felt there was probably more to it than that. The next day, Arya showed up bright and energetic, announcing they were heading to the labyrinth to train. Shiki hauled himself up. Yahello stayed quiet. Shiki noted she was holding back so she wouldn't make things worse. Arya told them not to waste time. She looked away. Elise watched her go, saying nothing. Inside the labyrinth, Arya walked ahead. Shiki asked if she was still angry at Elise. She said yes without hesitating. He pointed out she was still here, training him to protect her sister even so. She said of course, being angry didn't mean being unprepared. She added that this town wasn't as safe as it looked. Yahello stayed quiet the whole time, not wanting to cause more trouble. Arya explained that the Medine church at the royal capital had been attacked multiple times by a group that worshipped the evil lord. Elise followed Medine faith, and being noticeable only made her more of a target. Shiki noted that even while angry, Arya was still thinking about her sister and even praising her. Arya told Shiki it was time to start. She gave him his first task, take down an orc. Shiki tried to use the mana leak as an excuse to sit out. Arya shut it down immediately. In a flashback, she'd already told him what she expected, use what he knew about the enemy, fight with intent, and she and Yahello would cover him. Shiki pushed his hesitation aside. Arya told Shiki what he actually needed wasn't technique, but combat experience. With her here, and Yahello backing him up with her dagger skills, Shiki told himself he had no reason to hesitate. Yahello was watching. He moved. Shiki took the orc down. Yahello cheered. Arya said he wasn't as weak as he looked. Shiki processed the win quietly. He realized something useful. As long as he wasn't taken out in one hit, he could keep healing himself and stay in the fight. That changed how he thought about combat. Arya handed him something. Arya gave Shiki smoke bombs. She said she wanted him strong enough to protect Elise, but dying in the process would hurt Elise just as much. She told him to use them to escape or hide when needed. She gave Yahello a set too. Yahello thanked her, still a little tense around her. Shiki noted that Yuel would probably stay like that until the sisters made up. Shiki asked Arya directly why she hadn't made up with Elise yet. She said she was still angry. He pushed and suggested there was another reason she wasn't saying. She didn't answer. Orcs gathered nearby. Arya took her stance. Arya moved through the orcs hard and fast, taking them down while letting out what was really bothering her. Elise wouldn't change. She'd keep carrying everything alone, pushing herself to the edge for other people. That was what Arya couldn't stand, not the lie itself, not nearly losing the clinic. She was angry because Elise kept putting herself last. Shiki understood. Shiki and Yuel watched. Arya was the top student at the Royal Knight Academy, and every bit of that showed right now. She'd pushed herself this hard for Elise's sake, trained until she could actually protect her. Shiki put it together. Elise had sacrificed for Arya, and Arya had trained hard in return. That was the whole thing. After the fight, Arya quietly helped Yuel adjust her grip. Elise had sold the clinic for Arya. Arya was upset at that, for Elise's sake. Shiki thought about how straightforward it actually was. He decided to step in. He pointed out to Arya that staying angry forever wasn't going to change Elise, and that Elise acted the way she did because she cared. Yuel would keep worrying too if things stayed like this. Arya went quiet. Shiki told Arya to stop shutting Elise out and just say what she actually felt. If she did, Elise would probably promise to take better care of herself. Arya said nothing, then quietly said they should head back. She mentioned she had guard duty in the afternoon. Shiki didn't push further. Arya said she needed time to figure out how to apologize for how she'd acted. Shiki took that as a good sign. Arya called out to both of them, and they headed back. Shiki figured this would be a relief for Yuel too. Back at the clinic, Arya and Elise talked on their own. Arya told her that Shiki had been the one to push her to make up. Elise said that was unexpected. Usually that was Arya's role. Arya laughed and turned it around, saying Elise was the one who needed to hear the same advice about opening up. Elise told her to drop it, or she'd get the silent treatment next. Shiki and Yuel overheard enough to get the picture. Shiki thought to himself that things between him and Yuel were probably going to get complicated next. Fireworks went off over the town. It was the main day of the Melhearts festival. Shiki, Elise, and Yuel were out in the crowd together. Elise had made up with Arya and was taking a day off from the clinic to spend it with them. Yuel was enjoying the festival with money she'd saved up. Shiki winced quietly to himself. Yuel asked if he was okay and whether there was something he'd wanted to see. He said he was fine. Shiki's stomach suddenly cramped up. He told Yuel to go enjoy the battle tournament without him and not to wait around. Festival restrooms always had long lines. She refused and said she was coming with him. He told her to go on ahead. Yuel kept insisting she'd follow him. He activated the slave seal and turned it into an order. He told her to stop worrying about his stomach, go with Elise, and stay close to her. Yuel cried out for him as he ran off. He apologized silently for using it again. That was the second time he'd used the slave seal. He hated doing it, but he'd had no choice. He collected himself and stood up. Today, there was something more important to him than the tournament. The beauty pageant was his real destination. He ran for it, fully focused on the contestants. He made it just in time. A woman approached him and commented on his unusual dark hair. She introduced herself as Feline and said she was a priestess. Shiki recognized her. She was the famous saintess from the royal capital. He kept his guard up despite the friendly opener. Feline noticed his healer's clothing and confirmed he was a healer. She seemed to be studying him. Shiki realized right away what this was probably about. During the Crankite turtle attack, his healing had covered the entire town. People in town had called it a miracle from Medine. Of course, the church would want to know who was actually behind it. Shiki knew the longer he stayed, the more likely he was to slip up. He said he was in a hurry and asked to leave. She let him go with a smile, saying she hoped they'd meet again someday. He walked away without looking back. Shiki noted he needed to keep his distance from that priestess going forward. The pageant announcement cut through his thoughts. He turned his attention to the stage as the curtains opened, and an elf girl stumbled out with a yelp. The crowd reacted loudly. Shiki was impressed. This was already strong competition. Next came a bovine girl, and the crowd got even louder. Shiki's internal commentary kicked in. He acknowledged that size was its own category. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. Yuel had found him. Yuel and Elise were right there. Shiki tried to play it cool, saying his stomach had sorted itself out pretty fast. Yuel looked skeptical. Elise figured out exactly why he was here and said nothing about it. He apologized to Yuel for the lie he'd used to get away. He explained the real reason. A friend was competing, and he wanted to show his support no matter what. He admitted to himself that was still a lie. The friend was Lelouka. Elise called it right away. Yuel pointed at the stage. Lelouka was already up there. Lelouka appeared on stage in a very revealing outfit. The crowd erupted. Elise was unmoved. Shiki noted that the lie he'd told had accidentally turned out to be true. Lelouka spotted Shiki from the stage and reacted with shock, then spotted Elise right next to him. Shiki recalled that Lelouka had mentioned being interested in entering the pageant before. His lie had lined up with reality. Lelouka had entered the pageant hoping to compete against Elise and settle once and for all who was the better girl. She'd also wanted to clear her name after Arya had called her a mistress. She'd pushed herself to get up there in front of everyone. Her rival, however, wasn't even competing. Shiki noted he'd never actually promised Lelouka that Elise would join. The next contestant walked out to massive cheers. It was Phyline, the Saintess. The crowd completely lost it. Lelouka froze when she saw her. Shiki noted that Lelouka had clearly expected Elise to be the one up there with her. Phyline already had a loyal fan base. Lelouka and the rest didn't stand a chance against that. Shiki watched and figured the outcome was already decided. Then Lelouka suddenly grabbed at her costume. She declared it wasn't over yet. Yuel pointed upward. Shiki looked. Something was approaching from the sky, a large flock of winged shapes, too big to be ordinary birds. They were getting closer. He hoped he was wrong about what they were. The shapes descended on the town. People started screaming. Monsters were coming from the alleyways too, charging through the streets. The festival crowd scattered in a panic. Shiki stared at the chaos and had no idea what was happening. Knights moved to protect civilians while soldiers called out that evil lord worshippers might be behind the attack. Elise pulled Shiki and Yuel close and told them to stay together. Monsters were coming from the air and through the streets at the same time. Shiki caught himself. Something felt off. These monsters hadn't come out of nowhere. It was like they'd been hiding in town the whole time and only started moving now. Shiki was sure of it. They'd been tucked away in the abandoned parts of the old district, out of sight, just like the dragon he and Lelouka had found before. Wing beats closed in around them. A dragon swept overhead. Yuel and Elise stared up at it. Shiki pieced it together. The Crankite Turtle's poison mist attack would have been the perfect cover for someone to smuggle monsters into town without anyone noticing. He didn't know who had done it or why. He looked up and called out toward the stage. Phyline was still there. A guard moved to protect Phyline. On the stage, Lelouka was in danger. Monsters charged toward the group. Yuel told Shiki and Elise to get ready. Shiki and Elise braced as the monsters closed in. Yuel stepped forward and deflected the incoming attack, buying just enough space to move. Shiki watched from behind, and the monster went down. Yuel took out the boar monster. Elise lost her footing as another creature dove in. Shiki called out her name. Arya cut through the attacking creature and caught Elise. She asked if she was okay. Elise steadied herself and thanked her quietly. More creatures circled overhead. Arya told her not to worry about it. Arya moved through the remaining attackers without slowing down. She said simply that she was a knight. Elise watched her, overwhelmed. Shiki watched too and thought that Arya never looked his way when he protected people. The dragon was heading for the pageant stage. Yuel pointed it out. Ruruka was still there. Shiki told Arya to stay with Elise and pulled Yuel with him toward the stage. He noted to himself that if anyone on that stage got hurt, he'd need to be there to heal them. Shiki and Yuel reached the area and found Ruruka safe. Phyline was already handling healing for the injured nearby. Shiki called out to Ruruka. She was relieved to see him. He pointed out that the dragon was the same one they'd seen before. Ruruka said it was strange. Dragons didn't normally attack people like this. A magic tool on its neck was controlling it, she explained. Shiki said the tool was a monster control device, and that it was a tactic the evil lord cult was known for. He told Ruruka to run while she had the chance. The dragon wasn't leaving the area. Its target was clearly Phyline. Phyline said they needed to take it out with fire magic before it used its breath, and they needed to move fast. Ruruka hesitated at the idea of killing it. Phyline said the goal wasn't necessarily to kill. Removing the collar would stop the attacks. But if the breath hit them, they'd need to keep casting X heal until they could survive it. She noted her mana could only manage it once, so she needed them to make sure it didn't come to that. Shiki noticed that Ruruka clearly felt for the dragon. He figured she might freeze up or refuse to act. Feline kept her composure, but the easy smile was completely gone. She wasn't going to put any creature above the people around her. Shiki thought about having Yahello target the collar and asked her directly if she could hit it. He needed to convince Ruruka fast and then get out of the blast zone. Yahello said she could do it if Feline kept the dragon's attention. Shiki told her to go, then immediately panicked at himself for actually sending her. He shouted at her not to push it too far. Ruruka nodded and they ran. Shiki worried she'd caught what he said. The fight started before they were clear. Feline cast Fire Lance, and the dragon reacted. Ruruka shouted a warning. The breath attack was coming. Shiki ran. The dragon fired. Shiki grabbed Ruruka and pulled her out of the path of the blast. They hit the ground hard. He thought they were done for. They'd gotten caught in it anyway. The dust settled. Ruruka laughed weakly and said it had gotten her. Shiki looked at her leg. It was already turning to stone from the petrification effect. Shiki hesitated. If he used X-Heal now, Ruruka would see what he could do, and so would Feline. If that got out, they'd figure out he was the one who cleared the poison mist during the Crankheit Turtle incident. His quiet life would be over. The petrification kept spreading. He looked at Yahello and asked what she was going to do. Yahello launched herself at the dragon and went straight for its neck. Shiki watched, stunned. She was going to jump onto it directly. Yahello landed on the dragon and drove her blade into the collar. The dragon roared and crashed down. The collar broke. Yahello noted the dragon would stop attacking now, but used X-Heal anyway as a precaution. She apologized to Shiki that her mana was already running low. Ruruka stood nearby, confused about what had just happened. The people near Feline who'd been hit by the breath had all been treated. Ruruka had been too far away to get the same healing. Shiki stared at her leg, still turning. He made up his mind. Ruruka's life mattered more than keeping his abilities secret. If they found out, then so be it. A smoke bomb went off between them. Through the smoke, Shiki began casting. Shiki realized what Yahello had done. She'd remembered his healing was supposed to be a secret and used one of Arya's smoke bombs to give him cover. He thought she'd played it perfectly. Shiki used X-Heal under the smoke screen cover. Regular mages had to focus on spoken chants, but he could cast in silence. That meant Ruruka had no idea what happened. The smoke cleared just as the spell took effect. With this, he thought, no one would know, and Ruruka would be fine. Ruruka focused, knowing all she had to do was think it, and the magic would activate. The spell responded. She held on just long enough to see Shiki's face one more time. She told him she was glad. She told him she'd wanted to see him before the end. Shiki's mind caught up fast. Ruruka still hadn't realized the petrification was gone. She thought she was dying, and she was using her last moments to tell him how she felt. She'd always liked him. She'd accepted it and wanted him to know before she was gone. Shiki knew this was about to get very embarrassing very quickly. Ruruka started to say the words. She told him she'd always been in love with him. Shiki figured that was coming. He just didn't know why it surprised him anyway. She brought up their party with Fran and Sarah, then went further back, to before they'd ever met, when she was always self-conscious about her body. Taking hits from monsters left wounds that never healed right, and she'd build up a lot of scars over time. She asked if he remembered the first time they met, when he brought Fran along. Shiki did. She'd wanted him to help Ruruka out, figured scars from bad wounds were a serious thing. That was just Ruruka being Ruruka, Shiki thought. She reminded him that from the moment they met, he used a high heal on her and wiped out every scar she'd been carrying. She added that he might not even remember it. Even after she told him she had no money for even a basic heal, he cast a full heal on her whole body anyway. Shiki noted to himself that it was technically just a regular heal. His mana leak made it come out stronger than intended. Shiki wanted to break the moment and say Ruruka wasn't going to die. He'd already healed her. He stopped himself. That would kill the mood completely. Ruruka kept going, her vision blurring, apologizing for unloading all this in what she thought were her final moments. She asked if they could just stay like this and look at each other a little longer. The smoke around them was clearing. Outside, the town had settled. The dragon had been subdued without being killed. Shiki wondered where Yahello had gone. Then Ruruka reacted to something. Ruruka looked down and realized her leg was free, The petrification had lifted. She was confused, piecing it together. Shiki figured she'd just barely moved out of the way in time. There was an awkward beat between them. Ruruka fumbled, trying to bring back what she'd just said. Shiki cut in, telling her there was something he needed to clear up. Shiki explained that when they first met, he hadn't had good control over his healing magic yet, so the high heal she received was an accident. Ruruka processed that quietly. Then he kept going. Shiki immediately knew that was not what Ruruka wanted to hear. He'd walked right into it. Ruruka pointed out that he obviously liked making things awkward, and that of course he'd cover it with a lie too. She reminded him, after he'd noticed her scarred body, he kept giving her discounts at the clinic. She said that was exactly why she fell for him. Shiki was panicking internally, had no idea how to fix this. Ruruka smiled and told him he was just incredibly kind. Shiki tensed. They had an audience. Arya, Eris, and even Yuel had shown up and caught the whole thing. Both Shiki and Ruruka froze. The two girls looked devastated. Yuel said nothing. Ruruka realized they'd heard everything. Shiki's first instinct was to change the subject fast. He pointed out that Ruruka needed to get proper clothes before anything else. She was holding an item card she'd meant to return earlier, but decided to hold on to it a little longer. Arya and Eris reacted to the sight of it. Ruruka shut her eyes, embarrassed. Ruruka leaned in and kissed Shiki on the cheek. She told him she'd see him later, then walked off. Shiki stood there, frozen. The others watched in silence as she left. The group stood there quietly. Yuel made a small, broken sound. Eris immediately called it an affair and accused Shiki of being with that woman after all. Shiki was in full panic mode, desperately wondering if there was anything he could say or anywhere he could go. He silently blamed Ruruka for dropping him into this mess. Someone called out that they'd found him. Shiki turned. A saintess was standing there, calm and composed. He stared. Ruruka stared too. The saintess had a small smile. Shiki's mind went blank trying to figure out what the saintess had just said and what it meant. Saintess Feline, a key figure of the country who had been looking for Shiki. The moment she spotted him, she said she'd found him. Shiki had no idea why. Behind him, his group was falling apart. Yuel was stunned. Eris was calling it an affair and pointed out he already had her sister. Shiki's head was spinning. He pieced it together. The saintess had been right there when the smokescreen cleared. She'd seen Ruruka get healed completely. She already knew what he could do. Shiki knew he needed to find a way to talk his way through this. The saintess was tied to the state religion. Lying to her face wasn't going to work. Before he could think of anything, another figure approached. Bishop Darnod greeted the saintess, noting he'd heard she'd been caught up in the demon attack. The saintess deflected his praise, saying it was the knights and escorts who handled things. Darnod commented on the petrification being cured, calling it quite impressive. He'd come to help with treatment, but it looked like there was nothing left to do. The saintess smiled and called the town a wonderful place, the site of a miracle. Shiki wasn't sure if that earlier moment of confusion from her had been real or an act to draw him in. Darnod agreed, saying Melhart's was a fine town and that he'd felt that way since starting work there. The saintess told him she had someone she needed to speak with right away and asked if they could talk later. Darnod said he'd take charge of the situation. Shiki noted what Eris had said about the local church being untrustworthy and felt the tension between the two. He wondered if there was an internal split in the Church of Medine. Shiki was certain the saintess was planning to bring him in. He needed to negotiate somehow. Then the saintess turned toward him and smiled. He didn't know what to make of it. Darnod coughed awkwardly in the background. Shiki stood there, not sure if it had been a misunderstanding after all. The bishop's eyes were fixed, not quite on Shiki, but close. Shiki tensed. He figured the man was the real deal, and that restraining him and deciding what to do next was exactly the kind of thing someone like Darnod would do. But his gaze wasn't landing on Shiki. It was on Ellis. The look was unpleasant. Shiki could tell exactly what the man was thinking and hated that he could relate at all. He called to Ellis and Yuel to move. Arya had already been pulled aside by her superior and was getting a lecture. The saintess had probably gone to meet with the governor about next steps. Shiki decided they should head home for now. As they started moving, something made him pause. They were in the middle of a tense silence as they walked. Shiki tried to think of something to break the atmosphere, but came up blank. Then Yuel suddenly jumped and grabbed onto him. Ellis reacted with surprise. Something small darted out of the bushes and fell nearby. Just a demon, a leftover from the attack. Yule had sensed something and acted fast. Shiki quietly noted she'd been sharper than usual lately. He thought it might just be a stray demon, but he couldn't rule out the Saintess having someone follow him. After a crisis like this, he needed to stay careful for a while. A few days passed. The Saintess hadn't made any move. Shiki figured it was probably because he hadn't done anything to Ruruka on his own. She'd acted first. Still, the tension from the Ruruka situation hung over the house. Yule checked in on how he was doing. Shiki told her it wasn't that simple. Yule was being more forward than usual. She was brushing his teeth for him, which was helpful enough, but the positioning made Shiki uncomfortable. He thought something needed to be done about it. Yule called out to him softly. Shiki stood, gave Yule a look, and gently moved her back. She looked up at him, flushed and unsteady. Something had shifted in her. She muttered his name twice, barely above a whisper. Shiki caught himself and pulled back. He knew he was in trouble. Ellis walked in and asked what was going on. Yule snapped back to normal and announced she was done. Shiki felt relieved. Ellis said she'd come to let them know the bath was free, but clearly hadn't expected to walk into that. Yule quickly excused herself to go take a bath. Before she left, she told Shiki she'd have something to say to him when she got out. Shiki said he knew, keeping his expression flat. Shiki asked what was wrong. Ellis said nothing. Shiki noticed she'd gone quiet around him lately. He wondered if her feelings toward him had dropped. Maybe the Ruruka situation had put her off. Then again, she also just seemed down in general. He reminded himself he hadn't given Ruruka a proper answer, and that probably left a bad impression. Things with Ruruka had moved forward because of her confession, but he hadn't responded the way he should have. Shiki thought about it. Ellis looked like she was keeping something to herself. He figured she might be let down after the Ruruka incident, questioning his character. But she also just seemed low. The same applied to Ruruka. Their relationship had shifted after her confession, but he'd left things unresolved. He didn't feel great about that. Shiki's goal was clear. He wanted to build a harem in this world. His plan was to keep things vague enough to pull both Ruruka and Eris in. He just had no idea how to actually do it. He wanted Aria's advice, but meeting her now meant getting interrogated about what happened with Ruruka. And if he told her he wanted Eris in a harem, she'd probably cut him in half. The better move was to meet Ruruka and Eris one at a time and sort things out that way. There was also the separate problem of Yule. Dealing with her alone was getting complicated. A knock at the door. Yule came back, calling out that she was home. Shiki welcomed her back and noted she'd been fast. She said she hadn't wanted to keep him waiting, so she rushed. Shiki said they should get started. He told Yule it was time to work on her healing magic. She lit up. The training was just reading scripture to build her piety, nothing intense. But Yule had rushed through her bath to get back to it, which said something about how seriously she was taking it. Yule wanted to learn healing magic, so she could help if Shiki got hurt. He already healed himself just fine, but he wasn't going to brush off the effort behind it. While they were sitting together, a voice called from outside. Shiki looked up. It was Ruruka, showing up late at night. He wondered what she was doing there at that hour. Ruruka laughed it off, saying it had only been a few days. Yule asked if she needed treatment. Ruruka said no, it wasn't that. She went quiet for a moment, then looked up at Shiki. Ruruka had already confessed. Shiki really wanted to tell her he felt the same way. He thought about just saying it right here, right now. Ruruka asked softly whether she should not come if she didn't need to be treated. Shiki thought about asking Yule to give them space, but one look at her face and he knew that wasn't going to happen. Yule grabbed his sleeve. He decided to just pat her head and let her stay. Yule relaxed into it immediately. Ruruka watched from the side, wide-eyed. Shiki couldn't send Yule away. She was just insecure, and making her feel unwanted would only make things worse. If he told Ruruka he wanted to be alone with her, Yule would take it badly. Everything Yule had been doing lately came from anxiety. That was all it was. Ruruka stared as Shiki patted Yule's head again. Yule settled against him, calmer now. Shiki hoped it helped ease her a little. Ruruka went quiet, watching. Yule was licking his neck. Shiki told himself there was no deep meaning behind it. She'd probably just gotten tears on him and was cleaning it off. Yule was just anxious. That was it. He let Ruruka know he'd leave Yule alone for now. Ruruka asked if things had been okay after everything. Shiki said yeah. She mentioned she was staying at the governor's mansion and that the dragon was living there too. Ruruka figured she might end up switching over to working as Fran's bodyguard at some point. Shiki was surprised the dragon was just living in the mansion now. Ruruka explained she'd been feeding it daily, and they'd gotten along well enough that it let her ride it. The dragon had been under someone's control during the attack, so it was a victim too. The governor and the saintess both agreed to let it stay in case it came in useful. As expected, the saintess had gone to the governor after everything. Ruruka added one more thing, keeping her voice low. It seemed like the saintess was in town searching for something. Perch. The word landed hard. Ruruka had overheard the saintess talking with the governor. She planned to make someone pay for the damage done to the church, and she'd used the word purge. She'd also smiled, and said she'd found him when she spotted Shiki. He couldn't stop connecting the two things. The urge to just leave town was strong. Ruruka asked what he thought. Shiki said it really had him worried. He had no idea what was coming next. Ruruka said she had Shiki with her, so she'd be fine. She wrapped up and headed out. Eris had arrived and caught Ruruka leaving. Shiki's brain went into overdrive. Eris had seen it, and she might think they were meeting in secret. He needed an excuse fast. Eris stared at him and asked how far things had gone between them. Eris pointed at his neck and asked when that had happened. Shiki had no idea what she meant until she told him there was a mark. Yule hadn't just been licking, she'd left a mark on his neck. Shiki tried to explain it was a misunderstanding and that Yule had done it. Eris went still. Yule grinned in the background. That night, Shiki sat with it. Yule was really bothered by what had happened with Ruruka. Shiki woke up with something heavy on his chest. Ellis was sitting on top of him in the dark, looking flustered. He had no idea what was going on. Ellis apologized and admitted she'd snuck into his bed. Shiki was stunned. This was not something he expected from her. She said quietly that she'd wanted to be close to him, had been wanting it for a long time. Ellis said she'd been hoping he would come to her, since he was always looking at her that way. Her body had been burning up for a while, and she didn't know what was happening. She asked Shiki if he could fix it. Shiki woke up. It was a dream. Yule was asleep next to him, looking peaceful. He figured the dream happened because of everything going on lately. One day before, that day's training was supposed to cover practical use of healing magic. Yule couldn't get it to work at all and was devastated. Shiki told her not to stress. Her fingers had already lit up, which was a real milestone. He genuinely sensed she had talent, even if he didn't fully understand it himself. Yule hit a difficult chapter in the scripture and couldn't follow it. She asked Shiki to read it for her. Shiki said he'd handle it, even though he hadn't read it either. He figured it would probably be fine. The chapter heading read, "The Saint and the Succubus, Apostle of the Evil God." Shiki asked Yule what a succubus was. She described it as the lewd demon from adult-aimed stories. Shiki immediately got interested in reading. He found something useful in the scripture and told Yule to wait. There was a passage that might apply to high-level healing magic. The scripture explained that a succubus had a power called the demonic eye that could control the desires of living beings. One had once disguised itself as a human woman, infiltrated a city, and used that ability to drive the town into chaos. Shiki complained that the book had no pictures. He started imagining Ellis and Ruruka in that situation and had to stop himself. Shiki found the theory in the scripture genuinely interesting and thought it might connect to healing magic. The succubus eventually caused a population surge that led to famine and poverty, and the church sealed it away. Shiki said what a loss, half to himself. He really did wish they'd let it go. The scripture went on. After the sealing, the succubus's army of monsters took advantage of the chaos, destroyed cities, and a sixth of the population died from the war and famine it caused. Shiki noted that the succubus as an apostle of the evil god was ruthless, definitely not the win-win he'd imagined. Yule looked up and asked what libido meant. Shiki braced himself. Yule followed up by asking what indulging in intercourse meant. A knock at the door saved Shiki completely. He declared training over for the day, told Yule to help Ellis with cooking, and went to answer the door before she could ask anything else. It was Arya. Shiki had known she'd show up eventually. She was clearly there to ask about what happened with Ruruka. Shiki thought through how badly this could go. She'd call out the harem idea as insincere and say Eris couldn't be trusted to someone like him. She'd be right, and that made it worse. But he needed her to hear him out. Shiki tried to reason his way through it. A harem meant no cheating if everyone knew about it. Ruruka had already more or less said she was fine with it. But that logic wasn't going to land with Arya. He caught himself getting sidetracked and asked if she'd just called him Oniai-san. She confirmed it. He asked if she preferred Oniai-chan. She said she wasn't going there. Ellis was in the kitchen with Yule. With her out of earshot, Arya got to the point. Ellis liked him, no question. That way of calling him Oniai-san meant she was thinking brother-in-law. Shiki figured that was it, but his feelings about it were complicated. Arya wanted her sister's feelings to work out. She also made clear that she probably saw Shiki as cheating. She knew he'd been kicked out of the clinic, but she'd heard the reason through a letter. Ellis had kept the debt part quiet. Shiki admitted it was because of the harassment. Arya paused and wondered out loud whether Ellis might not have any real feelings for him after all, given how she reacted. Arya went quiet. Shiki couldn't read her. Then she snapped. She demanded to know what he'd done to her sister. Shiki told her to wait. He was seriously wondering if he was about to get arrested. Arya pushed back. She pointed out that Shiki seemed to think getting angry meant no feelings, but that wasn't how it worked. Lovers couldn't just touch each other anywhere at any time without boundaries. Shiki immediately backpedaled and said he'd been joking. Arya sighed and said if Ellis liked him knowing all of that, then she'd support it, but there was a condition. Arya told him clearly. Ellis liked him, no doubt. She'd gotten angry because he skipped proper steps. Ask her out properly, be direct about what he wanted, and Ellis would accept it. Shiki noted to himself that Arya's advice was useless for the harem plan. It was built on being sincere with Ellis alone. She told him she'd call herself Oniai-san only occasionally, since it felt weird. He said he got it. Arya said she didn't have much time. She needed Shiki to call Ellis out. She explained that she'd suddenly been assigned to escort the Saintess back to the capital and had come to say goodbye to her sister. Shiki processed that. The Saintess was heading back. It felt like something stuck in his throat had come loose. Maybe her business in this town had nothing to do with him after all. Shiki couldn't ask why, but things started clicking. The scripture story about the succubus and elevated desires, plus the fact that Ellis seemed to genuinely like him. Those were probably the reason he'd had that dream. It had felt so real, but it was just barely a dream. Shiki shook off the dream. The succubus in the scripture was sealed away and couldn't get out on its own. Only the highest ranks of the church would even know where. Releasing it wasn't something he could actually do, and he didn't want another famine or war anyway. Better to focus on something real. The clinic was closed that day, which gave him time to work on things with Ellis. Making himself look good in front of her was the more practical path forward. That afternoon, a friend of Ellis stopped by the clinic. Shiki listened in while pretending to teach Yule. Between the small talk, something caught his attention. The bishop had gone to the orphanage on the edge of town, apparently to review how much the church was donating. The orphanage was already struggling, and Shiki thought cutting the donations further would only make things worse. Summing it up from the conversation, the bishop kept finding reasons to trim what the orphanage received and was loading up on expensive magic items in the meantime. Shiki realized this was probably why Ellis didn't trust the church. And then it clicked. The orphanage that got shut down, the one Yule had been in, might be connected to all of this. Yule had to go out hunting to support the orphanage because of the financial pressure it was under. Shiki thought it, and this situation weren't unrelated. The friend stepped away to use the washroom and asked Yule to watch her baby. Yule took the baby and tried to calm it down as it started crying. Shiki stepped in and asked if it was hungry, since the diaper had just been changed. He told Yule to handle it more carefully. Shiki spotted an opportunity and tried to say something clever. He pointed out that Ellis had the right build to feed a baby. Ellis froze. Yule asked if Ellis was going to feed it. Ellis said there was no way she could do that. Yule said she didn't know that. Ellis gently explained that it didn't work that way. Only someone who had given birth could feed a baby. Yule apologized. Ellis smiled and said breast size had nothing to do with it, which was what adult books got wrong. She then turned to Shiki and asked what he meant by saying it suited her. Shiki realized he'd said something that came out strange. He tried to walk it back, but Ellis kept her eyes on him, waiting. Yule watched quietly. Ellis turned away with a small reaction. Shiki kept his mouth shut, deciding not to dig himself deeper. The Saintess left town. Shiki thought quieter days might finally be coming back. Things with Ellis also felt like they were moving in a better direction. Yule asked what was going on with him. He said nothing. He couldn't let anyone see that his heart was racing because of Ellis's smile. That midnight, the house was still. A knock at the door woke Shiki up. It was late. Ellis wondered if it was an emergency treatment. Shiki said he'd check. Yule was asleep. She'd worn herself out from training. Shiki considered at the door whether it might be Raruka, then decided no. She would have called his name. The door was already open. Shiki stepped outside. Nobody was there. He looked around in the dark, uneasy. A figure moved in the distance, carrying something. Shiki squinted. His stomach dropped. It was Ellis, bound, unconscious, being carried away. Ellis had been abducted. Ellis had been taken. Shiki didn't know what they wanted, ransom or something worse. Going back to get Yule would cost him the trail. Waiting on the knights would be too slow and too risky. If he lost sight of them now, there was no telling what would happen to her. He had to follow and get her back. The bishop had ordered it. Shiki recognized the voice from nearby, the same man who'd been staring at Ellis. He thought there might be a different reason for the abduction beyond what it looked like on the surface. A man of his rank ordering this directly seemed reckless. Then it clicked. Maybe the bishop wasn't the only one who had been watching for someone who performed a miracle. Shiki had done things that stood out. He'd used extreme healing on badly injured people to buy back the clinic. The archbishop's people must have gotten word from the adventurers he'd treated. They'd talked when pressured, and the trail led straight to the clinic. But what he couldn't figure out was why Ellis had been targeted and not him. The men walked straight into the church through the front door like they owned it. They really were acting on the archbishop's orders. Going in the front was suicide. Shiki found another way in and heard voices inside. Ellis had to be nearby. Inside, Ellis was still bound and just starting to regain consciousness. Ellis was on the floor, tied up, beginning to wake. Shiki spotted her but held back. There were too many enemies, and messing this up meant getting killed. The archbishop stepped into the room and told Ellis he'd finally found her. The archbishop told Ellis he'd heard about her healing work. He called her the ideal he'd been searching for, someone with the magical capacity for high-level healing, combined with a body suited to be a vessel for a real succubus. The subordinates had gotten the information from adventurers Shiki had healed. When threatened, the adventurers gave up who had healed them. They described a female healer with a dark elf girl with her. That made identification straightforward. If that's how the trail ran, everything made sense now. The archbishop pulled out a gemstone. The succubus sealed inside it needed a compatible vessel to be revived, and he planned to use Ellis for that. He'd waited and worked toward this. The dragon attack had given him the opening to take Ellis when her guard was down. Originally, the plan had been to capture the Saintess, but Ellis was the one he needed now. Shiki understood. The bishop planned to sacrifice Ellis to bring the succubus back. There was no time. Shiki had Arya's smokescreen on him. The plan was simple. Use it to blind them, grab Ellis, and run. He knew he might get caught right after, but he had no other choice. Shiki threw the smokescreen. The room filled instantly. Someone yelled about fire. Shiki grabbed Ellis and bolted toward the entrance. He apologized and told her he'd protect her. The entrance got blocked fast. Shiki needed another way out. The door was barricaded. A room with a window was nearby. A heavy chest sat next to the door. Shiki pushed it in front to buy time. The men outside shouted to break the door down. The archbishop's voice identified Shiki and gave the order to kill. Shiki focused. He just needed a moment. The bald man from the dragon incident stepped forward. Shiki remembered him. The archbishop confirmed that the dragon attack had also been his doing. His original plan had been to take the Saintess, but now he had Ellis. He ordered the man to kill Shiki. The man taunted Ellis, then offered his subordinate a reward to kill Shiki first. Ellis struggled, still bound. Shiki was furious. They treated her life like it meant nothing. He reached for his item box to draw his weapon. The man moved toward him. The man grabbed Shiki's arm and snapped it without hesitation. Shiki screamed. The man called him a disappointment. He kicked Shiki hard and sent him into the wall. The gap in physical strength was obvious. The man gripped Shiki again, threatening to break the other arm. He was toying with him. Shiki's arm throbbed. He couldn't win in a straight fight against someone this strong. Ellis stirred on the floor, still barely conscious. Ellis looked like she was trying to signal Shiki to run. He asked if that was what she meant. He had a smile jelly in his pocket. If he could use it to trap the man and run on his own, leaving Ellis behind, he might escape. But he'd already told her he'd protect her. He wasn't running without her. Shiki called exhale. His arms snapped back together. The man stepped back, confused. Shiki remembered training with Arya. Humans and monsters share the same weak points. Arya had told him to aim for the chin. He needed to land one shot and knock him out. The man noted Shiki was a healer, then hit him again before he could react. One of the enemy fighters snatched Shiki's item card off the ground. The Archbishop sneered at the idea of a healer trying to be tough. The man kept hitting Shiki with a weapon and told him to go ahead and heal himself. He wanted to see how long Shiki's mana would last. Shiki kept casting X-Heal and taking the hits. The man got irritated. Shiki was coughing on the floor. The man pointed out that healing required breathing, and Shiki could barely manage that right now. He told Shiki to cast or die, knowing he couldn't do either at that point. Then Ellis fired off her own X-Heal to heal Shiki for him. The cloaked fighter laughed and moved in. The man swung and Shiki dodged just enough. Ellis had managed to act. The man demanded to know how Shiki healed without saying anything. The Archbishop was unsettled. Shiki said nothing. Healing magic was the only thing he was actually good at. The big guy called Shiki a small fry. Shiki just stared back at him, silent and unmoving. The guy wasn't impressed. He thought Shiki was getting cocky. Shiki glared back hard, and that was all it took to make the air between them go tense. Shiki had figured something out. He didn't need to follow the usual rules of casting spells out loud. The reason he could still stand wasn't luck, it was because he'd realized something simple. There's no point healing after getting hit. Instead, he kept X-Heal running on himself the whole time, bursts of it firing off from every direction at once, keeping him on his feet no matter what. He'd placed healing spells on his body in advance, so wounds closed before the pain even had a chance to register. He'd lost a lot of blood, the floor showed that. But the constant X-Heal kept him going. And with the pain gone, he could hit harder than ever before. Shiki landed a clean punch and sent the guy flying. The old Shiki would have turned and run without a second thought. But not now. With Ellis behind him, he stood his ground and pressed forward. Shiki turned and found Ellis right there. She looked shaken, worried about him. He checked on her quickly, told her they needed to move. She pushed back, noticing how badly he was hurt. He told her not to worry, and kept going. Enemies were already blocking the way ahead. Shiki knew he couldn't fight that many, even with X-Heal. He told himself not to give up. Then a roar tore through the building, loud enough to shake everything, and both Shiki and Ellis froze. A dragon had crashed through the wall. Nobody had seen that coming. The dragon burst through, and behind it stood the Saintess and Ruruka. The Saintess told Ruruka she'd done well, and that she'd gotten to watch the Archbishop run away in a panic, which she seemed to enjoy. Ruruka was stunned that the Saintess had actually sent the dragon in for something like that. The Saintess just said it was how she repaid favors. Arya suddenly appeared, shocking everyone. Shiki had no idea why she was there. He thought she'd gone back to the capital. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but it looked like they'd been saved. Arya rushed over, worried about the blood on Shiki, asking if he was okay. Shiki tried to ask her what she was doing there, but she answered with her own questions instead. The Saintess then stepped in and explained to the Archbishop that she had a score to settle with him, and that she had known him and Shiki already. The Saintess addressed the Archbishop directly. Knights had surrounded the building, and his men outside the windows were caught too. She listed his crimes one by one: attacking the church, stealing the succubus gemstone, kidnapping The Saintess addressed the Archbishop directly. Knights had surrounded the building, and his men outside the windows were caught too. She listed his crimes one by one: attacking the church, stealing the succubus gemstone, kidnapping The Saintess tensed. The Archbishop swallowed something and powered up. He announced he'd never hand over the gem, then burst forward. He declared the succubus would be revived with it. The Saintess ordered her magic squad to begin their incantations. Shiki and the others realized the succubus was actually going to come back. Something shot through the air. Shiki and the Saintess watched as a figure landed on the ground below. It was the succubus, revived and already back on her feet. The succubus had been resurrected. The Saintess noted they could control living things with their evil eyes. Their goal was to reduce humanity. The succubus stood ready. Then she reached for her chest and realized something was very wrong. She froze. The Saintess watched, uncertain what was happening. The succubus panicked. Her power was gone. She couldn't understand how or why. Shiki watched from the side, unsure what he'd expected a succubus to look like, but this wasn't it. The saintess stepped in and told her to back off. The succubus pulled herself together and fired back. She threatened everyone, furious about being interrupted. The succubus was furious about being brought back in such a weakened state. She complained about the archbishop's fake powers and tools and called the humans pathetic. The saintess told her she wouldn't get away. The succubus charged up a blast and threatened to make everyone regret it. The dragon lunged at her from the side. The succubus boasted it was already too late. She'd had the dragon in her sights and was going to use him to crush everyone at once. The saintess warned the others that the succubus was using demonology to control desires. They needed to get out of her line of sight. Then the saintess fired an artificial sun attack, and the blast hit the dragon hard. Shiki quietly noted it hadn't looked like that big a deal. The succubus hit the ground. She muttered that controlling a dragon in this body was impossible. The creature had too little intelligence to work with. She dragged herself up and vowed to remember this. The saintess called for her magic squad to fire lance spells, pinning the succubus down. Something rolled in fast. Shiki and Raruka looked up just in time to see a small figure tackle the succubus to the ground. It was Yahello, pinning her down and demanding to know if she was the one who wanted to kill Miss Feline. The succubus insisted she was innocent and begged to be let go, saying she needed to get back to her master. Shiki recognized her immediately. He had no idea how she'd found him. The succubus went still. Yahello looked up and saw Shiki, then froze when she noticed all the blood. She kept repeating the word, barely able to process it. Shiki crouched down and told her it was okay, that he was fine. He apologized for not being there. Yahello said she was sorry too. Yahello explained she'd heard a loud noise from the church and figured Shiki might be there. She was embarrassed about letting an amateur beat her to it. The saintess stepped in and told everyone the succubus had gotten away, but there was no time to dwell on it. She was setting up a search party. She also pointed out that Shiki and his group looked exhausted and said she'd make arrangements once they reached the Lord's house. One of the younger girls turned to Shiki and quietly mentioned she wasn't sure if he'd heard, but something felt off about the situation. The girl brought up that when she'd been there earlier, someone had called Shiki Big Brother. She wanted to know what that meant. Shiki brushed it off, saying he didn't have time for that conversation. Later, at the great baths of the House of Lords, Shiki scrubbed off the dried blood, muttering that it was harder to get off than expected. Someone called out from outside asking if he was in there. Yahello had tried to get in with Fran and Lolka, but Fran and Lolka had managed to stop her just in time. Ellis had something she needed to say to Shiki. She told him that what happened to her was his fault, and that she didn't want to go through that anymore. Shiki listened. He hadn't properly apologized yet, and he hadn't explained himself either. He knew it must have been hard to hear what she'd said. He started to say something, but Ellis stopped him. She just thanked him. Shiki blamed himself for using X-Heal carelessly. Ellis pushed back. She said it wasn't his fault at all. When Baldus had been fighting Shiki, she'd thought Shiki wouldn't win and had wanted to run on her own. But Shiki had risked everything for her, even when he was worn out. She was glad he came. She also told him she never wanted him to treat his healing magic like something to feel bad about. The Archbishop was the one to blame. Shiki was caught off guard. She genuinely didn't hold it against him. Ellis thanked Shiki properly and said she owed him. Shiki didn't know what to say. There was still blood he hadn't fully washed off. Before he could figure out how to respond, Ellis asked if she could join him in the bath. Shiki told her that wasn't going to happen. Ellis pushed the bath door open anyway. She announced they were going to bathe together. Shiki immediately said no. A third voice cut in. It was Arya, pointing out this was the Lord's mansion and that Shiki was supposed to be in there alone. Ellis insisted she had only come to talk. Shiki asked Luca why she'd said that. Luca got flustered. It turned out Ellis had left Yule in someone else's care and come alone, which surprised Shiki. Friend had also shown up somehow. Shiki had no idea how they'd all ended up gathered in one place. Luca said she didn't know why, but she wasn't in love with Shiki. She was just checking what was going on, nothing more. The saintess warned that if anything indecent happened in her bathhouse, it really shouldn't. Shiki denied anything was happening. Friend said quietly that she hadn't been able to help Shiki when he needed it, and just wanted to be useful to him now. Yule grabbed Shiki's hands and said she wanted to wash him. Shiki told her to let go. Yule wanted to wash Shiki. Friend had been stopping her with the same idea. The saintess sent word that she wanted to speak with Shiki. Yuel apologized to Shiki for the trouble as they arrived outside. Shiki noted his injuries had completely healed from all the X-heal. No trace left. The Saintess recognized Shiki as the one who had mapped out the city's underground area. She told him he didn't need to hide his abilities anymore and that they meant no harm. Shiki connected the dots. She already knew his name and background, and she had used X-heal on Luca. He figured she wasn't planning to move against him. She explained the order had received reports of a pagan congregation dealing in memory-eating demons. Those demons had been planted by a former archbishop before the succubus was revived. The Saintess explained how the memory-eating demons worked. When they broke down, they consumed the host's memories and sent that information back to the succubus. She asked Shiki directly whether he had used X-heal in front of the pagan congregation before they arrived. Shiki thought it over. Yes, he had, more than once. The Saintess confirmed it. The succubus already knew exactly what Shiki could do. She warned him there would be attacks targeting him from here on, since no succubus would ignore a human with that much magical power. The Saintess explained the succubus hadn't left the city because the revival had been incomplete. For now, it was hiding in the dark and limiting their movements. Then a crash broke through the building. The succubus had come back, screaming that it was going to get eaten by a memory eater. It had tried to manipulate the desires of those nearby to use against the group. The succubus had forgotten that luring a flying demon while airborne meant getting caught by one itself. The memory eater latched onto it. Yuel moved fast and took the memory eater down. The succubus was rattled, laughing nervously and complaining it hadn't even been scratched. The succubus recognized Shiki, the black hair, the constant X-heal. It was furious, calling out that he'd been summoned again. It dove straight at him and announced he was going to die right there. Shiki had no idea what it meant by again. The succubus lunged, and the small figure beside it reacted. Yuel stepped forward. She was calm, but her focus locked on the succubus completely. Shiki could tell her instincts had kicked in, and she wasn't holding back. The succubus noticed and froze, visibly unsettled. Yuel launched her attack. The succubus scrambled to dodge, barely getting out of the way. It managed to slip past, but the near miss had clearly shaken it. Yuel stayed on it without hesitating. The succubus tried to use Yuel as a stepping stone to gain distance. Yuel called it out on that immediately. The Saintess told Shiki to throw a guiding knife toward Estelle's location to redirect the succubus. Yuel leaped off the succubus and chased it down. The succubus barely dodged an attack and noted that a flat-chested target made it harder to land a hit. Shiki said he wasn't interested. The succubus turned and said it saw more than that. Shiki shut the comment down. A knight arrived outside and called out to the Saintess. The magic squad had the perimeter surrounded. The succubus tried a different approach, using its evil eye directly on Shiki. The Saintess grabbed Shiki and told him not to let it happen in front of the succubus. Shiki said he didn't think it would work anyway, but the Saintess held firm. The succubus activated its evil eye. Shiki went blank for a moment. Yuel called out to him. The succubus pressed closer, deciding Shiki was worth targeting more directly. Shiki muttered that the succubus was pretty cute for what it was, then caught himself and told everyone that wasn't the point. He walked away. Yuel called after him. The succubus grinned and pulled out a small creature, calling out that Shiki should come closer. It laughed, pleased with itself. The Saintess saw what was happening and warned the others. The evil eye was working. Even a dragon could have been affected by it. She told everyone to hold position. Shiki moved toward the succubus, head fuzzy, barely registering what was happening. The Saintess told the knights that if someone had a reason to resist, the evil eye couldn't fully take hold. The desire might surge, but the action itself could be stopped. The succubus told Shiki to come to it, offering to do anything. The Saintess and the others weren't sure whether Shiki's reason was strong enough to count. Yuel grabbed Shiki from behind and told him to wait. Shiki's head was still buzzing, but he stopped. The Saintess decided it was unavoidable. She told the knight to hold Shiki down. The succubus snapped back at her to shut up. The Saintess went quiet, something flickering across her face. The succubus called out to the Saintess to take hold of Shiki. Shiki, still partly under the effect, tried to slip away. The knight moved to stop him. The succubus kept pulling Shiki in, insisting it would do anything for him. The others watched, tense. Ellis stepped forward too, caught up in it, saying the same thing. The succubus and Ellis ended up side by side. both reaching toward Shiki, both saying they'd do anything. Shiki stared at them, blank. Shiki heard Ellis's voice cut through. The succubus froze. It hadn't expected that. Ellis held Shiki's gaze, steady and calm. The word she'd used, anything, snapped something back into place in Shiki. He straightened up, the haze lifting, and the light around him surged. He was back. Both the succubus and Ellis were pulling Shiki in opposite directions. He knew he could only go one way. He stood there, silent, thinking it over. Shiki made his choice. He went to Ellis. He announced out loud that Ellis was better, and the succubus got knocked back hard. The knights watching were stunned, muttering that a human had just outcompeted a succubus at its own game. The succubus fumed that if it had been fully revived, things would have gone differently. Ellis, still flustered, told Shiki she could feel him pressed against her. The succubus tried again, offering Shiki everything he could want if he became its servant. Shiki hesitated for a split second. The saintess told the others to hold him back. If Shiki's power was misused, it would mean the end of the world. Ellis grabbed onto him and told him she wasn't letting go. The saintess pulled Ellis aside and told her she could see they had a special connection. She explained her plan. She believed that if Shiki's urges were satisfied, the succubus's hold would weaken for a while. She asked if Ellis could help with that, and proposed that the knights would block the succubus during that time. Shiki and Ellis both stared at her, stunned. The saintess said it plainly. Shiki's desires needed to be dealt with. Both Shiki and Ellis reacted with confusion. The saintess pressed the point. She knew how powerful Shiki was, and if he fell to the enemy, it would be the end of everything. Ellis quietly admitted she understood that. The succubus made its pitch. It told Shiki he was powerful, which was exactly why it wanted him. It laid out a vision of reviving an evil god, building the strongest monster army, and taking over the world, with Shiki becoming immortal along the way. Shiki called it amazing, completely deadpan. The saintess said there was no other way. Ellis seemed to be slowly coming around to the plan. Ellis turned to face Shiki. She was flushed but steady. Shiki looked back at her. Shiki kissed Ellis. They pulled apart after a moment, both standing close. Ellis asked quietly if that was good enough. Shiki was honest. He wanted more, but he was also aware that pushing further could get him kicked out again. He clenched his fist and held himself back. The saintess told Ellis to go further and use everything she had to fully satisfy Shiki so the succubus's influence would lift. Ellis was shocked. The saintess insisted there was no other way. Shiki decided he'd wait a little longer before going near the succubus. The knights and others reacted with disbelief at what the saintess was suggesting. The succubus kept pushing from the outside, telling Shiki it could give him everything one woman never could. Ellis stayed quiet. Shiki looked at her and said nothing. Ellis called his name softly. Ellis said she was embarrassed and didn't like it, but losing Shiki would be worse. She stepped forward and stood her ground. Ellis began undoing her own buttons. At the same time, someone else was working on Shiki's belt from behind. Shiki asked out loud who was doing that. Yule appeared and cheerfully announced she would help too. She reached forward. Shiki went blank. Seeing Yule snapped Shiki back to his senses instantly, like getting caught doing something he shouldn't. The effect broke completely. Ellis and Yule both called out to him. He took a breath, steadied himself, and the energy around him surged back. Shiki pulled himself together. He noted they were surrounded by knights and questioned what exactly he had been doing. He told Yule firmly to let go of his pants. Yule refused, insisting she was going to help him no matter what in case the mind control hit again. Shiki told Yule to let go and trust him. He was fine. Yule reluctantly backed off, muttering she had been so close. The succubus crashed back through the window, still not done, announcing it hadn't given up yet. The dragon showed up and went straight for the succubus. The succubus panicked and tried to keep it away. Shiki noted it was Ruruka's dragon, smart enough to resist the evil eye, fast enough to chase the succubus anywhere. A dragon was basically the worst thing a succubus could face. The dragon hit the succubus with a petrifying breath. The succubus yelped as the attack landed on its leg. The saintess immediately ordered the mage squad to move in and attack. The succubus fled, petrified leg and all, still managing to fly. The saintess ordered knights to send a squad after it and not let it escape. She noted that even a petrified leg wouldn't stop it from flying. She turned to Shiki calmly and told him they would continue their talk later, and that he should rest until then. Shiki checked on Ellis and asked if she was okay. She said she had just been desperate in that moment. Shiki noted to himself that the succubus had clearly been caught off guard by its own weak state. Ellis pointed out that if Shiki had actually made it to the succubus, he would have gone right out the window. Shiki admitted that was true, and it gave him chills just thinking about it. He also remembered that Ellis had said she would do anything for him, and quietly filed that away. The saintess returned and apologized for the wait. She got back to the point. As expected, the succubus had been after Shiki's life, because his healing magic was too much of a threat. She added that even now, standing near him, she could feel how dense his power was. She pointed out that this was why the saintess had brought him here. His magic was that significant. Shiki asked himself why she had really invited him. The saintess brought up something the succubus had said, that Shiki had been summoned before. She asked if he had read the Medine Bible. He hadn't, though he admitted he was curious about the part involving the succubus. Ellis filled in the gap, recalling a passage from the first chapter. When the evil god threatened the world, the god Medine sent an envoy from another world. The saintess confirmed it, and said she had been searching for Shiki all this time. The saintess explained that the sealing stone had been stolen from the church, and that the world was once again being threatened by the evil god. She took Shiki's hands as she spoke. Shiki noticed the warmth of her grip and wondered if it was her touch or the situation making him feel that way. The saintess called Shiki the one blessed by the god Medine from a faraway land, their savior and sage. Shiki was stunned. Yule and Ellis reacted with disbelief. Shiki muttered that they might as well call him a sleaze at this point. Shiki could already see where this was going. He would be labeled a sage, dragged into fighting demons and the evil god, and pulled into all her political dealings. He started to object, but the saintess smoothly offered him the position of bishop. She added that with his power, getting the church's approval would be no problem. Ellis protested out loud, and the archbishop in the background reacted with alarm. The saintess pointed out that if Shiki was worried about the succubus coming after him, having a position and authority would keep him safe. The saintess offered to arrange companions for Shiki, including Ellis, pointing out that being surrounded by people he trusted would protect him from the succubus's influence. Ellis immediately denied having that kind of relationship with Shiki. Shiki thought to himself that this was starting to sound a lot like what the succubus had been saying. He clenched his fist and told himself he absolutely could not let Yule hear any more of this. Shiki made his decision. He told the saintess that if she was calling him her sage, he would fight the evil god. He admitted his magic had been building up lately with nowhere to go, so this worked out. Privately, he thought he had played that perfectly. The saintess, Yule, and Ellis all reacted with quiet surprise. Shiki thought it through. Now that his power was out in the open, he needed the protection of an organization. Offering his healing in exchange for their protection made sense. And if the saintess could command knights, he would just heal from a safe distance. In reality, there was no way he was actually going to go face an evil god. The saintess told him to head out immediately. She added there would be a strategy meeting with the realm's leaders and the knight captain right after. Shiki stopped her. He asked what happened to the women who were supposed to protect him from the succubus. The saintess said that would come later, once the monster situation settled down. The saintess explained the succubus wouldn't be able to attack for a while with that petrified leg, and that the scouting team was tracking it. She wanted Shiki to support the knights in the meantime. Shiki accepted, though he kept thinking he really just wanted to be surrounded by a bunch of beauties for protection. Yule's cheerful encouragement was the only thing keeping him sane. Things had spiraled fast. Only a few hours after the attack, Shiki found himself healing a bunch of loud, burly knights, and had already started hoping the succubus would show up again soon. The day after the succubus attack, Feline stopped by to apologize for interrupting Shiki's rest. Shiki recognized her and asked what was up, quietly wondering if the saintess had finally decided to start putting his harem together. He hadn't seen Eris since they parted ways the day before, and he wasn't sure if Leluka had heard about the attack yet. Feline had brought someone with her, a small cat-eared girl named Estelle, her bodyguard. Shiki had been hoping for someone more impressive. Feline explained she wanted Yule trained so she could serve as Shiki's bodyguard too, and that Estelle was the one to do it. They headed to the training grounds. Yule was excited and ready to go. Shiki figured he was really just there to watch. He was relieved to finally be away from the knights. Estelle told Yule she had taken her by surprise last time, and that it didn't count as a loss. She intended to assess Yule's real ability before any training began. Estelle stated she had close-quarters combat training on par with knights and had no intention of losing to an untrained elf. Yule accepted with a grin. Shiki warned them both to stop before actually hitting each other. He could tell this was less about training and more about Estelle wanting to settle the score. Estelle gave him a sharp look. Feline quietly reminded Estelle that Yule was a tough opponent and not to go too far. Estelle acknowledged it and said she understood. Shiki repeated his warning to both of them. Estelle called him Sage-sama and said she got it, then launched forward to start. The fight was over in a blur. Shiki could barely follow their movements. Both of them were breathing hard when it ended. Estelle had lost, and she knew it. She tried to save face by pointing out that in a real fight, she would have had poison on her blade, which would have changed things. Yule just laughed. Estelle showed off the poisons she had made herself. Yule was genuinely impressed. Estelle explained it was basic shinobi work, making different types depending on the situation. She even made antidotes for all of them, which impressed Yule even more. Estelle was caught off guard by how openly enthusiastic Yule was. Yule said she had never actually used poison before. Estelle said that was fine. What mattered was learning from here. Shiki watched them getting along and noted to himself that Yule was pretty gullible. He asked if he could have some of the sleep powder. Estelle said that was worth learning. Shiki thought it sounded useful. Estelle explained the sleep powder was instant and had no side effects, so it could knock out enemies without killing them. Shiki liked the sound of that. Estelle added that it would be trouble if even someone like the sage used it to put a girl to sleep and take advantage of her. Feline calmly handed Shiki a vial and asked him to promise not to misuse it. Shiki promised. Estelle noted that Shiki's actions affected the Sanus's position too. Shiki said he understood and pointed out that Feline seemed to have a lot of enemies herself. He thought she might be kinder than he originally gave her credit for. Estelle genuinely looked up to the Saintess. She had saved her from being sold into slavery. Shiki had assumed Feline might have a cruel streak, but was starting to think otherwise. Yule asked if she could get some sleep powder too. Estelle said she couldn't use healing magic, so she would teach her how to use the antidote first. She said the Saintess wanted Shiki's bodyguard to become even stronger, like the hero who appears in the Holy Scripture. Estelle described the scripture. The legendary sage had a companion, said to be the strongest sword fighter of the era, who stayed by his side and defeated the evil god's minions. Shiki said that actually sounded a lot like what Yule was to him. Yule lit up and declared she would work to become Shiki's hero. Estelle said she should have brought more training tools. Yule was fired up now that she had a clear goal. Then she asked Shiki quietly, if he married Eris someday, would she still be able to stay by his side? Shiki was caught off guard. He realized that explained the uneasy look she had been giving him lately. She thought marrying Eris would mean losing her place. Shiki decided it was time to be straight with her. He told Yule he was aiming for a harem. Yule called him amazing without missing a beat. Shiki smiled and explained that this world had a system for that. It was made for people like him. Yule's expression shifted to something between disbelief and delight. Yule took a moment to process. One man could have multiple wives at the same time. She immediately decided that was convenient for her too. Shiki noted that Yule was probably thinking of it as convenient for Shiki, not herself, though he figured it was both. Yule bounced with excitement at the idea. Yule had worried that if Shiki got married, other women wouldn't be allowed near him. Now that she understood, she said everyone would be happy. She immediately announced she was going to tell Eris. Shiki stopped her, saying it was common knowledge adults already knew, so there was no need to bring it up. He made it their secret instead, and Yule agreed happily. Shiki noted the contradiction, but since Yule's worries were gone, he let it go. Lelouka and Eris showed up together, which surprised Shiki. The Saintess had told them to stay close to Shiki as protection against the succubus. Lelouka pressed herself against Shiki from one side and told him they had no choice but to stick around. Shiki noted they had apparently been chosen for this job. Lelouka suggested they go see Ruruka's dragon in the courtyard. Shiki was barely processing the situation. Eris quietly took in what was happening. Lelouka pressed close to Shiki, and Eris caught on. This was apparently how they were meant to keep the succubus from working on him. Shiki found himself pressed between both of them and completely lost his train of thought. Yule watched from the side, blank with confusion. Eris quietly told Lelouka she wanted to go with Shiki alone. She had something important to talk to him about, and it went against the agreement with the Saintess to do otherwise. Yule stepped in and told Eris and Lelouka there was no need to fight. Shiki tried to figure out how to handle it without making things worse. Yule announced that she was training, so they shouldn't interrupt, grabbed both Eris and Lelouka, and dragged them away. Shiki watched them go and told Yule he was looking forward to hearing about her training results later. Passing knights noticed Shiki walking with two women and started talking among themselves. They had heard the blonde one had outcompete the succubus, and that the red-haired one had been seen getting close to him. They debated who was his lover and who was his mistress. Shiki groaned quietly, realizing their situation had become public gossip. The two bystanders watching nearby muttered that Sage Sama had some nerve, then grumbled that they'd get their pay docked later. Meanwhile, both girls stared at each other in silence. Shiki's head was spinning. He knew he had to say something, but picking one of them meant losing the other for good. He realized there was no way around it. He had to tell them about the harem plan. Shiki called out to Eris. He had something important to say and didn't want to regret staying quiet. Eris said she'd hear him out on anything. Shiki braced himself. He told her straight. He genuinely hated how irresponsible he was with girls. Before he could say more, Eris cut in and hit him. Eris laid it all out. She was annoyed, even thinking back to before she started chasing him. The lewd looks he gave her every day, the way he groped female patients, the secret discounts he handed out to cute girls. Shiki couldn't argue with a single point. He shouted that he still couldn't give up on Eris. He asked to stop and settle things another time when they were alone. Eris refused flat out. Shiki panicked and bolted, yelling that he'd find a way to make it up to her. Shiki tried to get Eris to calm down so they could talk it out. Eris went quiet. She clasped her hands together and looked down. Then she told him, even so, she still loved him. Shiki froze. Eris said it again, clearly. She loved him. Shiki stood there stunned while the bystanders cheered from the side. Eris kept going. She told him about the moment she started falling for him. When he saved her life, when he helped buy back the clinic, when he chose to protect others over himself. That was when it happened. She asked him to choose her too. She wanted to marry him, no one else. Shiki's first instinct was to say yes right away. Of course he wanted to. But he stopped himself. If he accepted right now, he'd end up hurting Eris the moment he slipped up again. Lelouka stepped in and told him he couldn't do that. Shiki agreed he couldn't. One of the bystanders got excited about the drama unfolding. The other wondered what Shiki was going to do. Then the Saintess arrived. The guard snapped to attention. She apologized for interrupting while they were on duty and said she had a task that only Shiki could handle. She asked if he'd come with her. Shiki hesitated, but agreed. Eris felt relieved the interruption had come when it did. The Saintess explained that the succubus could attack again at any time, and that Shiki needed space to think things over anyway. She suggested Eris and Lelouka come along too, since someone needed to keep an eye on Shiki. Shiki followed along, quietly noting that the Saintess had him right where she wanted him. He just hoped things wouldn't get any more complicated. They headed toward the warehouse. The warehouse turned out to be Darnod's secret stash, discovered just a few days ago. It was packed with magical items. The Saintess explained they were short on appraisers and asked Shiki to help identify them. He figured he should get it done before Eris and the others saw anything problematic. He activated his appraisal skill and got to work. Most of the enchantments matched what had been used on the dragon, but some items had a completely different effect. The Saintess reacted with visible shock. The holy staff, the one that had been missing for ages, was right here the whole time. Shiki appraised it. Its effect was a massive boost to magic power. He noticed something else nearby. A second staff. He picked it up. The Saintess confirmed it was likely a replica. He appraised it. Same magic condition, but the effect was fire-extinguishing lubricating jelly. Shiki stared at it. Shiki called it a normal replica and moved on, not wanting to dig any deeper into why Darnod had something like that. When the appraisal was done, the Saintess thanked him for the help. She said he'd been a big help. Then she turned to Shiki and held out the real holy staff, telling him he was worthy of wielding it. Shiki took the staff. The moment he held it, he felt his magic sharpening and focusing. Eris and Lelouka said it suited him. He asked if the replica would also go to the church. The saintess said yes, though she admitted he might want it. Shiki quickly said it was nothing and dropped the subject. She then handed him one more item, a controlling collar, meant for defense against the succubus. The saintess warned him it was a powerful item that could command others, and not to misuse it. Shiki said he got it. He'd use it on the succubus. She also mentioned the previous sage's staff had gone missing, and that there was more to the story. She was about to explain when something crashed in from the side. Monsters that had been hidden among the magic items burst out. One of them latched onto Eris, and she cried out. Shiki rushed to grab her, while Lelouka screamed for him to do something. Shiki pushed Eris and Lelouka down and told them to stay low. He grabbed the holy staff. He thought the monsters were nothing Lelouka couldn't handle on her own, but he had a magic-boosting staff now, so he tried a fire spell anyway. Something felt wrong immediately. Instead of a controlled blast, the magic surged way beyond what he intended, like trying to tip a small glass and accidentally dumping an entire water tank. The spell went completely out of control. Feline knocked the staff out of Shiki's hand before anything worse happened. Shiki thanked her and tried to figure out what that strange magic surge had been. The fire had already spread. Shiki spotted the replica staff nearby, something that could put out fire. That was exactly what he needed. He grabbed it and charged forward. Shiki activated the replica staff. It unleashed a massive torrent of slime jelly that flooded the entire area and smothered the flames completely. The three girls got hit by the spray. The fire went out. Lelouka, Eris, and Feline stood there dripping, completely silent. Shiki, also covered, quietly noted that the replica staff had saved them. Someone muttered it might need a new name. The saintess asked if Shiki had been trying to use attack magic. He admitted he had. She said nothing for a moment, then told him she should have warned him earlier and apologized. The saintess explained that Shiki's magic power wasn't something that could simply be controlled and directed like normal. The previous sage had once tried attack magic, lost control, and destroyed an entire mountain. That was how he died. She told Shiki to stick to magic he was already good at. Shiki took it in and said he understood. While the chaos was going on, the monsters had escaped. The saintess figured they'd turn up somewhere and get dealt with eventually. The group was a mess. The saintess turned and called for Estelle. Yule appeared from right beside Shiki, completely undetected. Yule proudly explained she had been practicing concealment. Shiki told her firmly not to do that around him. He gathered everyone and said a lot had happened today. He asked them to hear him out. The saintess then spoke up. They were all covered in slime and exhausted, and they needed to clean up. She suggested they all go to the bath together. Shiki walked in and found everyone already there. It was a mixed bath. He grinned. Everyone agreed to use the mixed bath together. The girls were already in the water, looking uncomfortable. Shiki stood nearby, figuring they wouldn't get too upset if he looked. He just hoped the succubus wouldn't show up right now. While they soaked, the group talked about the evil god and its allies. Why the succubus and the evil god had started attacking people was still a mystery. It wasn't even written in any scripture. One theory was that they wanted to destroy all the labyrinths. The evil god had always torn through labyrinths on its path of conquest, so Shiki and the others, having explored dungeons themselves, would understand what that meant. No one had ever reached the bottom of a labyrinth. That fact alone suggested something powerful was hidden deep inside, something the evil god feared. One idea was that it held a device capable of granting any wish, or maybe magic that could summon a hero from another world. Shiki noticed that Yule's expression made it pretty clear she thought the saintess was talking about him. That wasn't helping him focus. The conversation fell apart when Lelouka started a splashing fight, and Shiki got caught in the middle. He forgot everything they had been talking about. Meanwhile, Yule stayed quiet off to the side. Shiki caught himself thinking that she always ended up being the most proactive in moments like this. She asked if she could sit on his lap. Shiki repeated it back, confused. Yule was already cheerful about it and moved toward him. He barely had time to react before she plopped down. Shiki panicked and told Yule to stop. He thought about blocking with his hands. He tried. It didn't work. The result shocked everyone nearby. He realized too late he couldn't get out of the way. Yule was coming down, and there was nothing he could do about it. A shout rang out. The succubus had arrived. Knights' voices followed, calling everyone to Shiki's side. Shiki felt genuinely relieved. He greeted the succubus with exaggerated thanks, bowing like she'd just saved his life. Then something cut through the air nearby, and everyone went tense. The succubus had brought light eaters, monsters that attacked and destroyed sources of light. The bath went dark instantly. Lelouka bumped into Shiki in the dark. He could hear her voice, but couldn't see her face. Then another figure bumped into him from the other side. It was Eris. He was very aware this was going nowhere good. Yule had night vision and spotted the exit. She told everyone to get out of the bath and regroup with the knights. Shiki scrambled to move and immediately tripped and fell. Yule called out to him. The others checked if he was okay. He insisted he was fine, loudly, and maybe a little too many times. Yule seemed different from usual, and Shiki noticed it. Yule had landed on top of Shiki in the dark. She was flustered, heart pounding. She kept thinking it was incredible, though Shiki had no idea what part of him she was referring to. Eris noticed and demanded to know what was going on. Things got worse when Shiki tried to get up. Yule grabbed him close, and they ended up tangled together. She was fully aware of how close they were and could feel how strong he was. Shiki's only thought was that he needed to stand up immediately. Yule pressed closer, saying she could feel his warmth. Shiki was dealing with a completely different problem. Lelouka protested that he couldn't do things like that. Shiki said his hand had slipped and that he was getting up. Lelouka pointed out he'd said the exact same thing last time. Then Lelouka slipped and fell with a yelp. Lelouka landed hard and winced. Shiki wanted to look, but it was too dark. Yule noticed he was staring in Lelouka's direction and called him out. He shot back that he couldn't see anything at all. The saintess told everyone to settle down. Their eyes should have adjusted by now. She said they needed to get dressed and go find the succubus. The succubus was just on the other side of the door. The saintess was tense. She wanted to deal with the succubus once and for all, and Shiki would be the bait. He quietly wondered if skipping out would be better, since Eris and the others were already there. The succubus had been after him all along. The succubus's petrification had only slowed, not stopped, and she still needed the sage to heal it. That meant capturing Shiki was part of her plan. The succubus fought back hard. The knights called for focused fire. She pushed through it, clinging to the idea that she had to survive until the evil god was revived. She kept moving, but her consciousness was starting to slip. Shiki moved in. Yule shouted his name. Eris pressed Shiki down and told him not to worry. She'd make sure he wasn't controlled, since he was her future brother-in-law. Arya shouted to her sister to keep Shiki pinned while she chased the succubus. Yule called out to stop, saying she felt something. An explosion went off. The succubus used the blast to break away and retreat. The saintess was shaken. She thought to herself that it was too late to use the sage as a vessel now. The knights called for a counterattack and ordered everyone to give chase. The saintess watched, focused. Something had been thrown at the saintess, Phyline. Shiki spotted it and moved to block it. He asked if she was okay. She confirmed she was. The attack had also helped the succubus escape. Phyline sent Estelle to round up anyone suspicious. Yule cast a detox spell. The group pieced together that it had been an assassination attempt tied to internal politics. Whoever did it had also used the chaos to help the succubus slip away. Shiki pointed out that the sage had always been someone who protected people. Phyline didn't need to carry it alone. The succubus had escaped again, and Phyline knew the bishop would likely use this to put more pressure on her. She noted that even Phyline, who had always seemed completely composed, was starting to lose that steadiness. She asked Shiki quietly if he thought poorly of her for it. Phyline apologized to Shiki. He was confused and asked why. She said of course she didn't despise him, then mentioned she might have to use her backup plan. Before she could explain, a voice cut through. An older man stepped in, clearly pleased with himself, asking if they'd finally dealt with the succubus. He said he'd been wondering how long they'd dragged their feet. Shiki had no idea who this old man was. Phyline addressed him as the royal bishop and told him the succubus had escaped again. The bishop wasn't happy. He suggested that if people kept seeing the succubus slip away, they might start thinking Phyline was an ally of the evil god, or even a worshipper herself. He offered, with a smug smile, to take over operations against the succubus in protection of the sage himself. Shiki watched and quietly wondered if the bishop was deliberately trying to strip Phyline of her authority. Defeating the succubus and protecting the sage, the bishop said he'd handle all of it. Phyline's answer stopped everyone cold. She announced that she was already engaged to Shiki. Shiki had no idea this was coming. The bishop froze. Word had apparently already spread that Feline had been in the bath together with the sage, and a nearby guard muttered that maybe the sage should take responsibility for that. Shiki stood there with nothing to say. Shiki weighed his options fast, denying it would hurt Filene's standing, accepting meant getting pulled into the bishop's shadow. But he also remembered he was on a mission to build a harem. Feline added that Lelouka and Eris had also volunteered to marry the sage in order to protect him from the evil god. The two of them stood there looking surprised but not disagreeing. The bishop had no more moves. Danger had passed. Feline turned to Shiki and quietly said she didn't dislike being with him. She added that she knew she wasn't the most worthy person, but she'd be in his care. Shiki was flustered. He noted, mostly to himself, that the saintess was also quite the beauty. Lelouka and Eris processed the situation. One of Shiki's wives. Polygamy. The word landed awkwardly. Shiki scratched his head and said he guessed that was how it was, then suggested they all get along. Yule leaned in close and told him quietly that he'd done it. Yule was happy, a situation where everyone ended up together. A harem. She called herself Shiki's hero. Shiki looked at her and said her name softly. The mood shifted. A deep rumbling sound rolled in from somewhere outside. At that point, Shiki had no way of knowing who the succubus would choose as a vessel or who she was planning to resurrect. Several days had passed since the harem was declared. The girls were getting measured for wedding dresses, and 4 rings had been laid out for them. It was starting to feel real. They were actually going to marry Shiki. Life continued as if the attacks had never happened. Shiki wondered quietly whether having 3 wives was really okay. Lelouka was starting to feel fine about it. With Feline busy with her duties, Eris and Lelouka took it upon themselves to keep watch over Shiki so he wouldn't go chasing after anyone else. They both made him confirm he'd keep looking at them properly, even if more women joined the picture. He said yes, a little overwhelmed. Yule sat alone by a window that night, quiet while noise drifted in from outside. She'd been reading the Holy Scripture since Eris and the others left. Shiki noticed she was unsettled. The wedding was clearly bothering her, even if she kept telling herself she was just being his hero. He wanted to do something for her. Yule was still too young. Even if she wanted to marry him now, Shiki knew that once she grew up, her world would expand and she might feel differently. That made it logically impossible. Still, seeing her looking sad hurt. He thought maybe some kind words would help. Then came a knock. It was Feline. She'd finally gotten some free time and had come to spend the evening with him as his fiancée. Shiki saw the problem right away. His relationship with Feline was that of engaged partners, but with Yule, it was still just master and slave. Yule was now clearly facing that gap. He started to suggest Feline try another time, fumbling for words. Feline noticed Yule wasn't reacting the way she normally would. She'd usually just offer to help. Shiki said it was a bit difficult right now. Feline picked up on it. Shiki said Yule could join them if she wanted. Feline said she minded. She told him he should mind too and asked if it was really fine just because Yule agreed, given she was still a child. Shiki clarified. He was going to let Yule stay either way. His actual plan was to send Feline off and spend the night comforting Yule by patting her head. Yule reacted with a small, hopeful sound. Before anything else could happen, urgent shouting broke out outside. Someone was calling for the saintess. A knight burst in with a report. The evil god had been revived. After being brought back by the succubus, it had put a magical barrier around the royal capital and was now heading toward Merhatz. The group took in the news with shock. The evil god's target seemed to be Feline herself. Yule declared she would protect Shiki. Feline agreed. Losing him would mean humanity losing its only way to fight back. She told everyone to stay in their room while she held an emergency meeting with the feudal lords. Shiki looked at Yule and noticed how worried she was. He understood the stakes. Even if he was sent to face the evil god, the captured royal capital would likely be destroyed. Feline would probably have to abandon it for the sake of everyone else. Getting the whole city to fight together would be hard. Shiki told Yule not to worry. This city had him, and there was no way he'd lose to the evil god. He said they should rest until Feline called for them and save their strength. Yule agreed quietly. The room settled. Yule rested against him, and Shiki lay awake thinking about the only way he could face the evil god alone. Eventually, he was pretty sure she'd fallen asleep. Shiki decided now was his chance to slip away. He tried to step out quietly, making up an excuse about needing the toilet. Yule was awake. She saw right through him. She looked at him calmly and said she'd noticed lately that he lied to her a lot. She asked him to take her with him. If he was leaving to go fight the evil god, she wanted to come. Shiki panicked inside. He knew there had been plenty of things that should have seemed strange. Yule admitted she'd been unconsciously choosing to believe he wouldn't lie to her. But recently, she'd figured it out. She held back tears and named what she'd noticed, that more than anything, he really loved a certain type of woman. Shiki was mortified that was what she'd picked up on. He told her honestly. Yes, that's the kind of person he was. If she hated him for it, he'd free her from being his slave. Fran or Feline would hire her easily. Yule said she didn't hate him. There was no way she could. Yule said his lies were all made out of kindness, to stop her from crying or getting hurt. She understood that he was trying to be a good master to her. He thought to himself that he wasn't that noble. He just wanted to look good in front of her. But he had never tried to shatter the image she'd built of him. Even so, she said, he was always thoughtful toward her. Every time she was close to tears, he'd patted her head and stayed with her. Master may not be perfect, she said, but he was always looking out for her. Yule told him she loved him and that she didn't want him facing danger alone. She wanted to be with him no matter what happened. She said she was his hero and she would protect him. Shiki looked at her and said it was the same for him. That's exactly why he needed to go alone. Shiki said he understood, and he patted her head gently. With Yule protecting him, he said, he didn't have to worry at all. He told her they'd go together. She lit up and said okay, promising she'd prove she could protect him no matter what. Shiki reached for something he'd been holding on to, something he'd never thought he'd have to use on Yule. It was sleeping powder. He used it on her, then took an antidote for himself. Yule's eyes went wide. She called out to him as her legs gave out. He caught her as she went under, holding her gently as she slipped into sleep. Shiki apologized quietly to Yule as she slept. He cared for her, not as a romance, but as family. He looked at her face and admitted what he hadn't said out loud. He loved her too. Without Yule, he wouldn't have kept trying to be the master she saw in him. That was precisely why he had to pull this off by himself. He stood, opened the door, and stepped out. The door closed behind him. Shiki slipped out and overheard knights talking. The evil god's forces were 2 days away by normal travel. He needed something faster. Then he spotted Ruruka's dragon nearby and realized it was drooling at him. He had no idea if it wanted to eat him or not. The dragon pressed close and nuzzled him. Shiki was stunned. It actually seemed to like him. He figured it might feel grateful. Maybe because he'd been the one to order Yule to save it from the evil god's followers, even if he hadn't done anything directly. That was enough. He asked it quietly if it could take him somewhere. The dragon carried him into the sky. From above, Shiki could see the royal capital in the distance, and the evil god's army advancing below, a massive force of monsters moving in formation. The dragon brought him to the edge of the barrier and dropped him off. It turned and flew away fast, clearly not sticking around. Shiki understood. He walked forward alone. The succubus appeared, surprised he'd actually come by himself. She asked if he'd been chased out. He said no. He told her he'd read the sacred texts, every record of humanity's past battles with the evil god. He was convinced a human had no chance of winning in a straight fight. So he'd come to offer himself as a servant of the evil god instead. The succubus went still, then smiled. She said it was just as she'd figured. She confirmed the evil god's side had no interest in attacking him. Shiki grinned and made sure to ask. She'd still build his harem for him, right? The succubus confirmed her petrification was cured. The one who'd done it was the royal bishop. She dismissed the evil god's side as hopeless. Shiki pieced it together. The bishop had been aiming to take down Feline all along. Losing to her had apparently been harder for him to swallow than the world being destroyed. He'd likely been used as a sacrifice for the evil god's revival too. The succubus told Shiki to wait and went to check with the evil god. Shiki got his first look at the evil god sitting on a throne in the distance. Shiki held something in his hand and kept his expression steady. His plan depended entirely on the succubus. The evil god's revival wasn't complete yet, which meant it would want to bring Shiki over to its side rather than fight him. The succubus returned and said the evil god would accept him as a servant, but only while he stayed under their control. The control hit him immediately. He grunted and held his ground. The succubus was pleased. She told him he was the only human she could still affect now that her body had changed. She moved toward him, offering a kiss to seal the deal, claiming that once he'd tasted a succubus's power that way, betraying her would be impossible. Shiki said he'd love that. The succubus froze. She noticed blood on his lip and asked about it. He told her he'd been biting the inside of his mouth the whole time to push through her seduction. The device in his hand activated and snapped a collar onto her neck. She went rigid, stunned. Shiki revealed his full plan. While riding the dragon over, he'd coated himself with slime jelly in advance. He'd also retrieved the subordination collar from the Darno warehouse. The pain from biting his lip hadn't been the only thing that helped him hold out, but it contributed. He told her not to even think about removing the collar. Her body wouldn't respond. He grinned and declared he was currently in sage mode. He thanked Ruruka's dragon for the ride, noting it had been very comfortable, and added that of course the dragon had bolted after everything he'd put it through. Shiki reminded the succubus of what she'd told him, that together they could conquer the world. He had the evil god's army on one side and the succubus's power on the other. He asked which was stronger and told her to find out by turning the monsters against the evil god and attacking it alongside him. The succubus, bound by the collar, had no choice. The monsters she controlled turned on the evil god by Shiki's order. The fight broke out immediately. The succubus was shaken. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Shiki pressed the attack with a combined force. The monsters hit the evil god hard. The smoke cleared, and the evil god was completely unharmed. Shiki stared. The evil god slowly extended a hand toward him. The evil god grabbed Shiki and slammed him down. It said it hadn't expected to get serious in a place like this. Before finishing him off, it asked one question. Was he also from Japan? Shiki, winded, confirmed it. The evil god said they were both from the same place, so it would explain itself. The labyrinths were tools for a god to interfere with the world. Whenever someone threatening the peace appeared, the labyrinth would summon someone from another world to stop them. The labyrinths were a problem for the evil god, so its goal was to destroy all of them. The evil god said being in another world was fun, and that it intended to use all its power and enjoy itself. Not just the labyrinths, but everything. Shiki said flatly that he didn't understand that at all. The evil god fired a massive blast at him. It called healing magic boring and told Shiki to disappear. Shiki hit the ground hard. Shiki fired back and told the evil god it was the one who would vanish without a trace. The evil god was shocked. Its attack had been deflected. Shiki thought it through. He couldn't win outright, but he could force a draw. He let the evil god burn through its attack magic freely, just like when he'd handled the same situation before. He didn't want to die, but for the sake of everyone in the labyrinth city, he had no other choice. Shiki apologized to Yule. The evil god struck again, and this time the succubus moved, stepping in front of the blast. The collar around her neck shattered. Shiki stared, not understanding what had just happened. The succubus told Shiki she finally understood. The labyrinths might have been tools of divine intervention, but they were also a trial, and those who overcame them could be granted any wish, including turning back time. Shiki looked at the evil god. The succubus stood her ground, free, and declared that she would never forgive the evil god for killing her master. The succubus said the labyrinth could turn back time to grant a wish. Shiki wasn't following. He asked if she was actually saying she had cleared the entire labyrinth, the one even the evil god couldn't conquer. She stood there armed and ready, and he stared at her, stunned. He also couldn't help noticing she kept calling him master. The evil god attacked again. Shiki barely dodged. The woman stepped in without hesitation, firing magic without a single chant. She announced she wouldn't allow anyone to hurt her master. Shiki watched her fight and registered how strong she was. The evil god pushed back hard, but she held her ground. He noticed her silver hair and her manner of addressing him, and a thought started forming that he couldn't quite finish. The succubus, still collared, offered her life to the evil god and was absorbed into it. The evil god started drawing in her power. Shiki realized he needed to act fast and give an order before it was too late. He thought back to when he was young. If he had been in the succubus's position, he would have understood her completely. The woman activated a sealing technique, telling the evil god it was over. She thought aloud that if she had been the succubus and the evil god had been her master, She would have done anything to bring it back. But that was a different story. She sealed the evil god away, said farewell quietly, and the seal closed. A small stone dropped to the ground. She said she would never allow a world where her master didn't exist. The evil god, sealed inside the stone, let out one last sound. She picked it up, then raised her sword and brought it down hard, smashing the stone completely. She deflected the evil god's final attack outright, sending it back. The reflected blast hit the evil god directly. Shiki watched it happen with wide eyes. The evil god took the full impact and went down. The woman stood at the edge of the blast, sword lowered, eyes closed. The dust settled. Shiki stared at her standing in the field. He started to ask, "Is it over?" She turned. Tears were already forming in her eyes. She started to say something, the word beginning to form, "Master." She ran straight at him and held on tight, saying she'd missed him, that she'd wanted to see him for so long. He stared at her face and said her name. Really, she was Yule, wasn't she? She answered yes, and called him Master. Shiki's had understood it, but his heart wasn't keeping up. Just a few hours ago, Yule had been a child. Now she was right in front of him, fully grown. In the future he had been heading toward, he would have died fighting the evil god. Yule had changed that. She held him and said she had worked hard, that she had wanted to see him one more time. She told him she had heard that clearing the labyrinth could grant a wish, so she had done it, to reach him and stop the evil god before it killed him. Shiki thought about how long she must have trained to reach that level, and how many years she had fought. As a dark elf, Yule lived longer than humans. She told him he had promised her a reward when they used to explore the labyrinth together. Shiki didn't remember saying that, but if Yule said it was true, he accepted it. He asked what she wanted. She told him directly, her eyes filling with tears, that she loved him too. He looked at her and said it back. Yule kissed him. Shiki's mind went blank. He was flustered but didn't pull away. Shiki told himself to stop. This was Yule, and this was wrong. Then immediately argued back that she was an adult now, so maybe it wasn't. He kept going back and forth, not resolving anything. Yule began to glow. She told him quietly that in a future where Shiki didn't die, the current version of her, the one who had grown up through all those years, wouldn't exist anymore. Shiki asked if she was okay. She smiled and said getting to see him in the end was enough. She was happy. She asked him to give whatever was left of her reward to her younger self. Yule faded away, dissolving into small points of light that drifted upward. Shiki knelt in the grass, watching her go. When the last light disappeared, he was alone. He said her name quietly. A few days later, bells rang outside a small chapel. Shiki stood there with Leluka and Eris, both in wedding dresses. Eris said she found it hard to move around in hers. Leluka told her it looked good. Shiki said they both looked wonderful. The evil god was gone, and the world had settled back into peace. The wedding ceremony between Shiki, Phyline, Eris, and Ruruka was finally happening. Arya told her sister to see her later and headed off. Phyline gathered everyone and said the celebration would follow the ceremony. Shiki stood surrounded by all of them and thought, this was it. His harem ending. Yule's young self stood nearby, smiling with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed with happiness. Shiki thought about everything that had happened since the fight with the evil god, about the adult Yule who had saved him and then disappeared. He'd been thinking about what he owed her. His answer was the ring on his finger, and the words he said to Yule directly. When she grew up, they would get married. Shiki couldn't marry Yule while she was still a child, so he gave her a ring instead, proof that the promise was real. With that ring, the words he said wouldn't just be a gentle lie to her. Yule believed him completely. He had also quietly arranged a private ceremony for just the two of them later. He admitted to himself, though, that he didn't really have the courage for it yet. The adult Yule had loved him just as much as the young one did, and he knew he had to properly answer that. Eris and Ruruka had accepted the plan without much fuss. They had both been worried about Yule feeling left out, so they helped make the ceremony happen. After the main wedding wrapped up and the other guests cleared out, Phyline stepped forward and asked if it was time to begin the secret ceremony for Yule and Shiki. Shiki said yes. The officiant asked them both to vow to build a happy family together. Shiki said he did. Yule said she did too. Shiki thought the ceremony was going smoothly enough, but he'd forgotten one thing. The officiant announced that vows in the Church of Medine were sealed with a kiss. It was mandatory. Yule went wide-eyed. Shiki froze. Feline told him it was just a formality. He understood that this ceremony mattered deeply to Yule, and that he had intended to marry her when the time was right. But he hadn't planned on kissing her now. Part of his reason for keeping this private was exactly because Yule wasn't fully grown yet, and physical contact was still a problem. But Yule very clearly wanted it. Shiki told himself the ceremony was important to Yule, and that he couldn't make her cry by refusing. He also couldn't come up with a way around it. He thought about using the same line he always fell back on, that they could do it once she was an adult. But that was all he ever said lately. He kept telling himself to think until the very end, but nothing came. He decided he had no choice but to go through with it. They leaned close. Shiki's mind went blank. He couldn't think of anything. He looked at her face and thought. He just couldn't. They kissed. Yule stood with her eyes closed, petals drifting around her, the whole labyrinth city spread out below in the distance. And Shiki's one overwhelming thought, as the series drew to a close, was, what should I do? The end.